All right, good afternoon. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. Welcome to our afternoon meeting. With that, I'd like to bring the regular meeting of Township of Langley Council to order, and the first item is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson moves, Councillor Whitmar seconds. Guess we're back to our regular screen here, not online, so I see no speakers. All those in favor? No, just by hand and opposed. That carries, thank you. The next item is adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 13th. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Ferguson and a seconder.
I'll second.
Councillor Kunst, any errors or omissions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed and carried, thank you. We move to delegations, and we have one delegation. That's Maureen Berlin from the Ishtar Women's Resource Society. If you can please come forward and welcome here. And for information, we have 5 minutes to present, and I'll let you know if it's getting close. Okay.
Is this on?
It's on, yeah,
Okay.
and it picks up really well. You don't have to lean into it or anything, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome here.
Councillors, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present here today. I'm here today with several of my colleagues. My colleague Meredith, who is our coordinator for the Stop the Violence programs, will also be presenting. The need for safe housing for women and children was first started here in Langley 49 years ago. So congratulations, Langley, for being the first ones to identify this need. But today we still don't have second stage housing, which is what we are trying to get and what we're fighting for. So we're asking for your support to help the province to understand that the Langleys also has the right for second stage housing for women and children. Second stage housing is typically an apartment in a town or a townhouse where a woman has the opportunity to live for approximately 18 months, and she does have support of counselors and the other support staff that come from the Ishtar Foundation. So with that, I'm going to ask Meredith to present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just want to speak a little bit more to the scope of the issue of domestic violence in Langley and the scope of the impact that this project may have. As we know, we just found out this year the Langleys are the second fastest growing municipality in all of British Columbia. And with this influx of people comes mass opportunity for flourishing and vibrance in our community, but also brings with it a great need for infrastructural supports that will ensure access to this rich, vibrant community for all members who are here. Along with that influx of population, as well as the rising costs of living and the lingering impacts of COVID-19, we know that women here are at women and children, an increased risk of family violence. Unfortunately, this problem knows no geographic boundaries and is prevalent in our community. I'll ask for a moment to speak just a little bit of statistics that we track here at Ishtar. We track the nightly stays at our transitional short-term housing based on the number of women and children by the nights of stay in that month. Between October and April of last year to this year, we had an average of 392 women and children staying with us in our houses. In our community programs, community-based victim services, and our outreach workers who serve women trying to find housing, to deal with family law legal issues and the criminal court systems, our workers average about 100 clients each. In my program, the Stopping the Violence Women's Counseling Program, the average wait time for women seeking trauma counseling is 6 to 12 months because of the demand. And this year alone, between January and June at our transition houses, we had to turn away almost 700 women and children because we did not have space. So that's 700 women and children who either had to return to a violent situation or had to leave our community. The need in Langley is great. We know that women and children women who make that decision to leave a violent relationship are 5 times more likely to be in poverty when they choose to leave. And so that means women are making a complex calculation about what their best option is to maintain safety and guardianship of their children, to maintain their own safety, as they ask themselves the question, if I leave, where will I go? And unfortunately, without the infrastructural supports that we need in terms of second stage housing, the answer increasingly to that question, where will I go, is not Langley. And so, that is why we are standing here before you, Ishtar Women's Resource Society and our community partners, in solidarity with one another, to ask for your support, the support of Mayor and Council, in pushing forward this project for affordable second stage housing for women and children. While we have been in ongoing dialogue with BC Housing, the project is stalled, and so we are looking for all possible alternatives to push forward this great and dire need. So thank you for giving us this opportunity. We stand in solidarity with our partners, with the women and children of Langley, those who would seek to call this place home, and ask for your support as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I do have members of council who wish to ask some questions, and I want to thank you for coming here today. In my other lifetime, a million years ago, I was a police officer. My very first call in my Block 2 training was to a very serious domestic assault. And it's quite moving, and unfortunately I went to many more. What's good about from then to now is things have changed, the courts have changed. I think a lot has changed and improved the way those cases are handled. But I saw it firsthand in my very first call, and it's tragic. So I want to thank you for coming here. And I know there's others who want to ask questions, and certainly happy to, council can, desires, we'll make a motion to support by, lobbying the provincial government and Ministry of Housing and wherever else you think we should send letters to, and we certainly be happy to do that to get this needed resource in our community. So, thank you. I'll start with Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you very much for coming out and showing your support in the purple wall. I appreciate that. I just wanted to comment. I first met Ms. Berlin at a Women's Day event this year, and it was the first time it really came to my acute awareness of what the challenge was in the township. And so I really appreciate your coming today, because I did notice that on our tables, all councillors have a colorful binder with information. I think part of this exercise, from my point of view, really needs to be about community education to make sure that we're all on the same page, starting at the political and social level, about what the challenges are that we're facing, and to make sure that we're working commonly towards a good solution for this. So I think I do know that you have services that you're currently offering, but the one really critical component at this point is the second stage housing that's missing. And it is really key, I think, in terms of stability and decision-making and planning, and making sure that people do not have to make that terrible decision to go back to an abusive household solely for the reason that they cannot find an alternative. And I certainly know we're all aware of the housing crisis and affordability, so that just really heightens what the challenge is. And so I really appreciate, and I know that there are materials in here about BC Housing and how we can partner and things like that. But I do think the township should be playing a leading role in making sure that we're helping to advocate, because 49 years in our community, and it would be great if on our anniversary of the 50th we could get some really good traction towards the needed housing. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming today and presenting to us this information. It's really helpful for us to know. I just had a couple of questions around second stage housing, and you talked there about apartments or townhouses, and I'm wondering sort of how many units would be a good number to sort of target in the township of Langley. I'm assuming more than one townhouse, so I'm wondering sort of an apartment building, how many units sort of is what you're kind of looking for, thinking you need?
So we're looking at initially 36 units. And they would be from 1, 2, 3, and some even 4 bedrooms, because some of our women do have 3 or 4 kiddies, and the government likes the kiddies when they get to a certain age to have their own room. So what's happened typically in other communities is they're doing a purpose-built building. So the housing is. So the building is built exactly to the needs of the clients. That's what would be the ideal situation for us here too.
Okay, so sort of 36 units intentionally built for this purpose. Okay. In the conversation, as you were presenting to us, you mentioned there is currently 392, I think I've got, women and children currently living in, and then you mentioned in our houses. Can you just maybe explain what you mean by our houses?
So we have 2 transition homes as well that are meant to be a limited 30-day stay for women and children fleeing more of an immediate crisis. Again, because of the crisis of housing affordability, that 30-day stay is much more expansive than that typically, because we're looking to house people until they can find something like second stage or an affordable market rental. Again, at this point, typically they're going out of the city and the township because it's not affordable here. That number of 392 nightly stays, again, is the number of women and children staying in the house multiplied by the number of nights in that month.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, that's helpful. So how many units do we have in Langley of transition housing?
We have 2 houses.
2 houses, okay.
And their occupancy is 10 in one and 12 in another.
Wow, okay, not very many,
Technically.
not very many.
Yeah, no.
Okay, well, they're very good information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
You always wait for the light to go on. Thank you for coming. I know I'm very well of Ishtar and others. I've known people on their board and contributed and otherwise. Okay, so cut down is to get going with BC Housing otherwise. You need some land. Okay, land's expensive, so you need to work on a project. Like they've got a number of projects throughout the region. They picked up some land. Now, in Vancouver, myself, and I know that Councillor Woodward as well, we visited fire halls that have put housing on top. Now, I can't tell you the locations. I try to keep those things quiet, right? You don't want people knowing about it because of the nature of the business. We are, in the township of Langley, looking at building new fire halls. So this is an example of an opportunity. I can't promise you anything, and that's where you look for opportunities. So we can do, I know there's elections around the corner and things like that, but the reality is you need some land, and then we can work with BC Housing and other facilitators to work to make some of these things happen, because you need to make it happen. Talking about it, we can talk forever. We need to make, and I was really impressed, I'm sure Councillor Woodward as well, with what they did in Vancouver. So I'm just gonna leave that with you. I don't want to patronize you or anything like that. I think it's what's your cause is nothing short of phenomenal. I've got 2 daughters. One's getting married this Thursday, so I know how important it is, your cause. So keep doing what you're doing, and we want to see you again, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you very much for coming out to speak to us. So you mentioned that 700 people were turned away, women and children were turned away. Were all of these from Langley Township? All of these people?
That data actually we don't have available. We do have folks who call in from the broader area, might be calling from Delta, White Rock area, or Surrey, but very close by. And the majority, yes, from Langley City, Township, or Aldergrove.
Okay. Well, Aldergrove is part of Langley Township, yeah. And have you spoken to our MLAs about getting funding?
Yes, we certainly
And-
have. We've spoken, we've spent a lot of time with Megan and Andrew talking about it. We've sent the message to Minister Eby's office. He's aware of what Ishtar is doing and the need. So, yeah,
Okay.
we're knocking on everyone's door.
Door, yeah. So I take it then what you're looking for from us is some sort of advocacy letter of support to the MLAs and Minister Eby to get this started. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I just had one question, and how many communities have secondary housing in the province? Are there other communities that have the kind of housing that you're looking for?
Every community almost. You'll see in your package, there's a list of every other community that has second stage.
Okay.
And Langley is the only community of its size that doesn't. So now when our women are leaving the transition house and we're looking for second stage, we go to Mission, Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Maple Ridge, Burnaby, Delta, everyone else to ask for help because they all have second stage housing.
Okay, so my next question is, why has BC Housing then stalled the request to have housing in Langley?
I don't know that. you know, they're saying, yes, you're going to get it, yes, you're going to get it, but every time we send something forward, it doesn't seem to be what they want or what's appropriate. So recently, they just took the Travelodge in North Vancouver. They leased it for 2 years. They gave it to another organization to manage. So I asked if we could lease the Travelodge here.
Right.
But
So that is what you're sort of looking for, is some kind of, you know, housing, like a Travelodge type of,
ideally, when they first started talking to us, they said there would be a purpose-built building. But as,
see.
you know, things have been delayed, we're really looking at it one mother, one child, one night at a time. So, so out of just desperation, I'm asking them anything, would this
Right.
work, would this work, would this work? So
how long does a family stay in the secondary housing? What would,
18 months approximately.
18 months,
So
okay.
it really gives them a chance to stabilize, get a job or get whatever else they need to be able to make it on their own. That's the key, really,
Right.
allowing them to move forward with their journey.
Great, well, thanks so much for that information and for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm a little curious. I do see the list here of the other cities. So are all of these secondary housing providers all separate buildings? Because wouldn't it be also good to integrate to say have some rental units, a couple in this building, a couple in that? Is that also a model that you would follow, or that's not something you want?
No, it's a very good model.
Yep.
That's what they've done in Kelowna. That's what they built in Prince George. So there they've got they've got the administration, transition houses, second stage, and even sometimes affordable housing, all in the same structure.
Yes, because I know that there's also a demand for seniors that are displaced for a little while. So I am on the housing committee with Metro, and there was discussion about having rental units available specifically for your clients. So in other words, you could have 2 or 3 in this building and have it sort of spread around. And to me, that might be better than everybody being together. And certainly a hotel conversion, although better than nothing, isn't really a great place for a family to live, is it?
No.
And I don't think underneath a fire hall necessarily is either. I've heard some very, very sad stories about that. Not sad stories, but not necessarily great success stories for what's been done in Vancouver, in cost, and also being in proximity to first responders can also be quite traumatic for families and so forth. But I wanted to talk about that, having rental units. So when rental units are built, and that would be much easier to fund too, rather than trying to build a 36-unit townhouse, which is going to take years in zoning and land, as has been mentioned. A budget could be put aside to have rental units. So anything we can do to help will help in any which way we can, I'm sure. But thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Again, at this point, we're open to being very creative. The initial proposal was to have a purpose-built building that would have and house our administrative programs as well, like my program, the counseling program, community outreach, and victim services, so that women would be wrapped around in terms of support for that 18 months as they prepare to move forward. But yeah, we're open to creative at this point.
And this letter for BC Housing is 2018. Yeah. That's not right, is it? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Okay, we move on to reports to council. Section E. E1 is the UBCM grant funding opportunity for extreme heat risk mapping, assessment, and planning. And moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Long. Councillor Richter.
Yes, as this money is going to be looking at emergency response primarily, and I think that that's a wonderful thing. Can they also look at access or emergency access to water? And in particular, I'm referring to well access on the township property that's on 216th Street across from the airport. And the reason I bring this up, and I'm going to get to it under other business, but I had a chat with one of our long-term well drillers in the community who sat on the Water Resources Management Strategy Advisory Committee years ago. And he raised this and the need for this, particularly in the event of a seismic incident. But I'm thinking it's probably not just seismic, but heat-related as well, to be able to have access to a potable water source that the township owns that the public could easily get to. So I'm wondering if the grant is accepted, could we include emergency water sources as well in the list of topics to be discussed? Thank you.
Mr. Backen, I think that's, I think that's a good idea. Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. Just a couple quick points, maybe more clarification. It says in the executive summary, the BC Coroner Service reported that there was 23 deaths related to the event within the city of Langley and the township. Is this grant tied up together, or is it this is just for the township of Langley? Not, we don't have to take the 30,000 and split it.
It's a township
So
only.
this is just for ours.
Yep.
And on page 2, action related to extreme heat, 30,000, like, I'm suspecting that it would take a lot more than 30,000 to put up of, some of these, like it's got in here, implement, do we have to use the 30,000 on these four? Like, do we have to plant shading trees in public parks, and do we have to put up more, it's not related just to this, is it?
No, I believe it would be funds to come up with the planning, and then any capital would come to council through the regular channels.
Yeah.
Such as the budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it may go a little further than
That's right.
what's in the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Yeah, thanks, York. Not too long ago, we talked about a community shuttle, and Councillor Kunst and I managed to corner the mayor of Delta, right? And he told us about the success of their shuttle system, and he said where it really came in handy was during the heat dome, because they had to find a way to get folks to the cooling centers and back. So I think that would be also a consideration. We have all these cooling centers. There's something in our package here that lists them all. We have a dozen or so around the communities, but it is an interesting challenge for seniors and all kinds of people to get to these centers and then get home. So, I don't know where that initiative on the community shuttle is. We did talk about it, and everyone was very supportive of it, but maybe staff could make a note there that that could be put into the planning too, because getting people around is another issue.
Thank you. Yeah, even if it's part of the plan for during the event. Councillor Arnson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And just to follow up on those comments, in fact, at our last Seniors Advisory Committee, we had an extensive report, and part of it was having to do with the emergency preparedness and the coordination of the efforts that we have ongoing, because in fact, what we know from last year's unprecedented heat dome is that there were a lot of gaps, let's say, in what we were able to do in terms of our infrastructure. So one of the things we talked about was this grant, and our committee, also Councillor Ferguson sits on that committee, were very supportive of this idea, because in particular, as we know now, after the fact, most of the people, or many of the people that were affected, were very vulnerable senior adults, and they had some real challenges. So the idea would be that any and all of the things that we would bring forward and could be identified, I'll call this a template. Some of the things are best practices, I think, from other communities to try and manage the interface between those needing the help and those that are providing it. So I think the $30,000 is just to lay the groundwork for what it is that we would be contemplating in the Township of Langley, because subsequent to that, we also, I think it would be iterative. We find out what has really been successful and maybe think, okay, if we had more of a shuttle bus service, then we could have provided service to individuals who needed to be elsewhere, or we could have libraries that had some functional use for air conditioning, but how to supply that. There were many different things that came up with the brainstorming at our committee meeting. So I think that overall we're fairly well prepared, but this I think provides a really useful and paid for mechanism. So the $30,000 will provide a consultant that can give us very concise information about some of the things that we can do in the township. So that's why I think this is very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you. I won't repeat what Councillor Arnson said. We did discuss it at the Seniors Committee, so she's bang on, so I appreciate those comments. I'm just happy that staff are proceeding with something like this. We're often criticized at the council level for not proceeding or moving fast enough. It's an opportunity. We're proceeding, and our staff are proceeding forward, so I think that's a really positive step. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will now call the vote. On E1. Carries unanimously. Thank you. I'll get up there. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. Oh, back and forth some hybrid meetings too. Okay. Councillor Richter, I just see your. Okay. I'm to clear the queue. If you can start again, then it helps with my orders. Thank you. The next item is E2. It's temporary use permit application number 5. It is properties east of and access via 1030 272 Street. Councillor Long moves it. Second by Councillor Davis. Councillor Richter. Just, there you go.
Speak in opposition to this, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to amend it if I can, but I'll wait till everybody's had an opportunity to address it. I am extremely concerned about putting a permanent truck parking facility in this area. Very, very concerned about it. And I think that that is what this is intended to do. The other thing that causes me concern is when I first saw the movie and film production studio uses, I thought, gee, I wonder if it's related to the existing production group that's down there already that have built that sound stage. And it's not, apparently. They were unaware of it. I had an email, I don't know if from the CEO, and I don't know if she contacted the other members of council yet or not. So what exactly are they planning to do there? Are they actually going to put up more sound stages there? And if that's the case, why are they even doing a temporary permit? Why aren't they just coming forward and getting a rezoning to permit that, and so that we can go through a proper public process and get input from all the surrounding neighbors on it? And I'm just very concerned about the wording, particularly on page, just a minute here, I've got it, page 13, where the proposal says to permit movie production facilities and all uses ancillary thereto, and additionally truck parking and all uses ancillary thereto on the developable area of the site. I think this should be a rezoning, not a temporary use permit, and I'm very opposed to it, but I would like to amend it to drop the parking, the truck parking aspects of it.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to you. Mr. Backen, did you have any comments on some of those questions that were raised?
I think there has been some concern about permanent facilities, and there can be no permanent facilities on this by the nature of the permit itself. I believe why the permit is being introduced as this step is to see what the impact would be in terms of the area itself. There are facilities of a permanent nature, I guess, across the street. And as well, we've just realized or just learned that the Denbo property is being used on a temporary basis appropriately for some of the parking that they're seeing for some of the movie studio uses. As to the other issues, mostly I think for the will of council, the email we're shared, we have a copy of that, and I think it's accurate that there is no direct relationship between the parties, although we are noting that the movie studio production on the west side of 272 is using, we think, the Denbo site. So we again emphasize these are temporary uses, and they're such that they can be revisited, and there can be no permanent structures placed on these properties. It's really trying to capture the language to allow the ancillary uses that we're seeing on some of the Denbo properties. As to the truck park, that's something, I guess, for the will of council. This is a former gravel pit site that's been reclaimed and refilled as part of the process. It's been actually brought to the level of 8th Avenue in terms of the height of it. There's been some concerns about the height, but now it's actually to its original level. And as such, it's gone through some significant environmental, I guess, hoops, if you will, and continues to do so to make sure that the property is properly capped and is properly set up for some of the uses that we're contemplating. But again, council can deliberate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. I also, well, maybe I'll just, the first question is, when I read this, I also thought it was related to the movies. But investigation on page 9 as well as 13, but it says the temporary use permitted on this land shall A, B, C, B, parking of commercial vehicles. I know we have to have, and there's a shortage of truck parks, But on the other hand, I look at this and the second thing that I'm concerned about is temporary use permits may be issued for a term of up to 3 years and may only be renewed once. So does this mean it's a 6-year? If they get 3 years, then can we go to 6? And the other question, obviously, I think we know the answer. It says, are the commercial vehicles related to the movies? Because if they're related to the movies and it's real obvious, but I don't know if it's so obvious right here. Sorry, go ahead. It's through the staff.
Yes. Mr. Backen, yeah, that's a good question.
So 2 parts, maybe 3 parts to this. Just keeping in mind that we regulate the uses, not the users. We have to be careful to make sure that we're considering the totality of the area and making sure it's appropriate. Secondly, then your question is, well, how long is this permit for effectively? Well, it's for 3 years. If they came and said they wanted to do a further 3 years, council would have to pass a resolution to consider that, or they could direct perhaps a permanent rezoning if that's the case. Keeping in mind, though, that we've had, I guess, more favorable experiences with the 5 or 6 that we've done where we try these basically on a trial basis, so there is no permanency to them, so that if there is an issue, council can move away from it a bit. And thirdly, I think your interpretation is correct, that these are not necessarily limited to movie uses. These are 3 uses that are stipulated that can overlap, but they need not overlap. They could also be independent for the purposes of the permit itself. So they do not need to be strictly related to movie studio uses or movie uses at all. They could be something independent.
Okay, yeah, I don't not want to vote for it, but well, maybe we'll hear what the amendment has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Some of these concerns are ones that I had on reading this report as well. I really am thinking that I know that some of the conditions address the issues that I'm concerned about, some compliance issues with the streamside protection, but I don't know that if you're going to have a huge parking lot like this, usually we talk about things like storm scepters and other ways to make sure that there isn't oil or gas or other kind of leakage coming from parked vehicles. And so I would like to see, if we're moving forward with this, some kind of condition that would put in that requirement. I mean, 3 years is quite a long time for something like that to be allowed on a site, irrespective of what's happened there before. Because even if injurious things have happened there before, I don't think it should be something that we are condoning by allowing that to continue. My other questions would be this idea that if there's any restrictions that we could put on this as to timing, because if you're having, for example, I'll call it spillover parking that's coming from other uses, who's going to monitor that kind of thing? And is it the case that it's the business owner that's looking at that and saying, well, we have 20 available spots, so why don't we just sublease these spots to another entity that would like to be able to use them for their own purposes? Because I got the idea that this would be something that I'm totally in agreement. We don't have enough parking places, and they're an extreme shortage, but then where are they appropriate to site? And is it a good idea to allow somebody for a 3-year timeline to be able to develop themselves? Because I think on the one hand, yes, you could find out what the problems were associated with that, and then maybe hold them up to different conditions if they wanted to change the zoning. But I'm really quite concerned about, things like the noise and the impact on the neighbors. So I'd be agreeable to supporting an idea that we should actually have a canvassing of the neighbors. I think we need to have more public input about this to see what the will of the neighborhood might be, because that way we'll be able to get an idea, I think, of some more helpful conditions to add should we wish to otherwise support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Backen?
So, Your Worship, just to provide, I guess, some comfort, there was a mail-out and advertising done, and the response that I think that was received is on your distribution list today, which is, I think, concerned with the history and some of the environmental concerns that have arisen. Again, the nature of the temporary use permit by limiting it to 3 years does not commit council for a second permit or for the longer term And we tend to agree as staff that there would be probably a positive thing to have some designated areas to go to. And that's why this is probably one of the few areas where these sorts of uses could be contemplated. But again, that's up to council, because the other answer is we do not contemplate these sorts of uses. And the other piece to it, I suppose, is the infrastructure. It's a bit of a balance in these circumstances because of the nature of the site and the environmental concerns that have been expressed and the environmental regulations that are in play. This site seems to be conducive to the temporary permit without, I guess, a massive degree of infrastructure. The problem with the massive degree of infrastructure is the cost associated with it would generally lead to a longer term, and that may then commit this council or future councils on paths they feel uncomfortable with, hence why we thought it was an appropriate area to at least begin with a 3-year term and see what that transpires or how that transpires. But again, it's really, again, location-wise, is there other locations for these sorts of uses? It's going to be tough to find something that's this remote from everyone else behind a waste transfer station. Has been actively under a fill program for a number of years, as the communication today references, and some of those challenges. So.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, thank you. I mean, that explains exactly why it's an almost an ideal use for this property. I think this council should be very supportive of the movie industry. And good grief, there's no way that you can have a movie without having a bunch of trucks. I don't know if you've been on a movie set. I have help out once in a while at Colgan Hall because we have movie rentals there, where the trucks are it's all about the trucks. The trucks have generators in them, they have shops in them, they have supplies and special effects units. I mean, it's all about the trucks in the movie business. So it's not a surprise at all that trucks are very important. And if you look on page 7, the P5 already has a whack of uses that are very, very close to this. It just doesn't have the production studio and the parking of commercial vehicles and this other thing about trucking compound. I'm not sure really if that's what we're discussing here, public transportation depots. I guess that's so people can come and go, right? They can bring actors and extras into the property and take them out. So this is an ideal complementary use to anyone that's doing a movie. This brings great employment and benefits to the township. It's a location that is incredibly remote. It's not our land. That's another thing. I mean, we make reference to Jackson landfill, but this is not township land, right? And there are other activities in the region that are ours that we lease out, I imagine, but not this one. So I don't see a downside to this. And really, the best part of it is the 3-year permit. So that gives us a chance to see how it goes, and the next council will have to decide if it's going to be expanded. And it also as Mr. Backen has said, the temporary permit also restricts certain things, permanent structures and other things that could be a concern. So I think it's a great report and a great use for the property that we should, as a council, support.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you. Yeah, this certainly brings up the need for having places for trucks to park and places to go in our community. We know that's a significant concern in our community, and this does seem to be really an appropriate site. This is a sort of a land that was originally a gravel pit, primarily used for that purpose, being reclaimed for other things. It does have some residential areas around it, but the primary neighbors to this is the Langley Waste Transfer Station, which is beside it, Raptors Knoll Disc Golf Course across the pathway, and then we have some movie production facilities there. So this is not really a residential area. This is out in the rural area, close to right beside the waste transfer station, which is I don't think going anywhere too soon. And so having truck park there seems to be a totally appropriate thing to do. We need that, and I can't think of too many other locations that would be better in Langley than to do this. So it makes a lot of sense to me. I like the fact that it's temporary on this. And I just had a question, though, through your worship to staff. It is a 3-month temporary permit that's being asked for. Is there, 3-year, not 3 month, 3-year. Is there a, do we go in on an annual basis to see how things are going? To see if they're meeting the criteria that we've laid out, or do we just wait for 3 years and then to see where things are at, or is there something that's done annually? Or
Not per se. What we have is a use that's allowed for a defined period of time. The best example would be permanent uses. If we have complaints or there's issues, we certainly go in, but we don't actually go and patrol them or look for them. We would look for their history, their facts, if they come forward for a further application or for rezoning itself, as was suggested. We'd actually rely on that information at that point, primarily complaints or issues that are arising in the area. So, and we have to be careful to distinguish those, say, between noise from the waste transfer station, as you said, versus from the site itself or from other sites to the south.
Great, okay, thank you. Well, I guess my preference would be that we do something on a temporary basis initially, see how it goes before we move to anything permanent. And then we can decide after 3 years whether we want to make this a permanent decision or whether we want to continue temporary or whether we want to end it. Gives us lots of options, but to me, the temporary option is a great way to go, and it meets the need that we have so dearly in our community.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to be agreeing with some of my colleagues and supporting this. I spoke, through the course of the last few months, I've spoken to some members of our community that live in Aldergrove and are parking their trucks in Surrey. And their life consists of driving to Surrey to get the trucking as a business, and then going back to Surrey, and then driving to Aldergrove to get home. And because we don't have enough supply of truck parking in our community, and that's a kind of a story that resonated with me. That's a a working person who's getting by, raising and supporting a family using the trucking industry and spending 45 minutes to an hour each way just to get to and from his truck. And we also have challenges that I've seen and talked to a number of property owners in the ALR where there are no other options, and so they end up parking them and spreading them around on ALR land. And because they're not viable alternatives that are close by, especially with the price of fuel these days. So I see the need for truck parking. I've heard it. I've talked to people that are experiencing it. I've seen truck parking occurring on the ALR, which I don't want to see. So I support it. I also was, along with Councillor Long, looking at the list of permitted uses within P5, and they're quite extensive and very similar. Some of whom, like refuse disposal facilities, public works yards, maintenance yards, all seem very similar to the use being requested here through temporary use permit. So I like the facility of temporary use permits in many cases. Rezonings are taking far too long. And then if you are adding 1 or 2 buildings, you're now waiting even longer for a building permit if you have a small shelter or other building on the property, even if it's accessory to the primary use. And the temporary use permit allows the solution to be put in place much more quickly when it's a very strong need, as opposed to seeing it approved and then not actually in place for a number of years in some cases. So I like the idea of seeing it put in temporarily. I noticed and saw that residential, adjacent residential uses or farm uses perhaps, with residential being the primary use, to the north have a pretty healthy green buffer there, so I took some comfort with that. I'll echo Councillor Whitmarsh's comment about the surrounding uses don't seem incompatible to me. So I support it. I didn't share any concerns regarding the film industry. I support the film industry. I think it'd be great to see some diversity in the film industry here. And again, but primarily support it for the use of truck parking. And if there's a need to once in a while host filming there, I think that's better to see it here than on agricultural land. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with some of the comments made today. Not entirely. I think it's important to note, if I may, it's a question through the chair to staff. There'll be no buildings whatsoever, and if any buildings were to come forward, they would require some sort of a rezoning or development permit. Is that true, if I may, through the chair?
Effectively correct. The permit itself precludes temporary the permit itself precludes permanent structures. If one wanted to put a permanent structure on, they could perhaps do so under the current zoning for the site, but not for the temporary use permits, I guess, uses that are specified. So as a consequence, it would be very restrictive. And you're correct then, if one wanted to go to a permanent use, to a permanent facility reflective of the temporary uses, it would require rezoning.
Okay, so I think it's important to note that I'm not sure if we're doing this because we're looking at truck parking. Truck parking is an ancillary use for this particular application. And there is information from AES Incorporated regarding environmental services and looking at environmental impact, and that's in the report. There's a whole long list of conditions in the report as well as us, the opportunity to look at it as a temporary use and a review again in 3 years. So as much as I say we have to address truck parking in the future, I'm not sure if this is step one, as some of my colleagues have said, but this is an opportunity for us to at least explore future truck parking or parking of any sort. I know Surrey's had to go through this, and so has Maple Ridge and other communities as well. So Langley is part of that. It'll be a discussion for another day, but I'm supportive of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
I too am supportive. As a wife of a trucker and a daughter of a trucker and brothers who all drive trucks, as one thing that I hear constantly is the lack of parking for truck drivers. And you know, we all want what the trucks give us, but we don't want them down our streets and in our communities to park. So yes, I'm definitely in support of this.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Richter, you wish to make an amending
Yeah,
motion?
and I just wanted to say, what really concerns me about this application is that on the surface, it looks like it's for the film industry, but it's not really for the film industry. It's all about getting a truck park in there. And I don't see how a truck park is something that goes well with an area that has environmental concerns, or alternatively goes well with an area that has a movie stage there, movie production facilities. So I would like to amend the motion by striking transportation and truck parking and truck compounds, including public transportation depots. Just strike that and replace it with, film production studio uses, including parking of commercial vehicles and or equipment related to the film industry. That makes it very clear that if this is supporting the film industry, it's a good thing to do, and it makes sure that it will support the film industry. So that would be my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I look for a seconder, I'm just going to get some advice from staff. From your comments, Mr. Backen, about our authority to regulate the use but not the users, I think you said, does this motion, this amendment, satisfy the test that we can make this and we're within our jurisdiction?
I think so, Your Worship, to the extent that it's requiring that the uses, I'm going to use an example. I think there was 3 uses. We're just going to call them generically movie studios, if you will, those sorts of uses, but not the studio itself, but the ancillary uses, commercial vehicles and truck parking. I think it's striking 2 and 3 and restricting it to the movie-related uses that are there in place, and then council can deliberate upon that.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Davis seconds it. I'll open discussion on that. So, Councillor Davis. Thanks. It's going to be on. There you go.
I was pressing my button and I couldn't keep up to you, Mayor Furrows.
Yeah.
And anyhow, what I hear is maybe I pressed my button because I want to clarify this, is when I read this temporary use permit application to permit movie and film production studio uses, comma, parking of commercial vehicles, and it's been brought up here at the table, truck parking. Now, truck parking, to me, is commercial truck parking, where you go to park your truck, you drive for an hour to Aldergrove, get in your truck in Aldergrove, you may drive for 3 or 4 days, and then park at one. The commercial trucks are different than this application, so that's why I want to clarify this. And I'm not, Councillor Richter, I'm not really on the line here, but by putting related in there, absolutely takes it to the movie industry. So are we asking for a truck park? Or are we asking for both? Or are we asking for just movie and a related vehicles? I'm confused.
Mr. Backen, I'll ask
Your
for
Worship,
clarification.
I'll start in reverse order because I think that it's in the comments afterwards where it then does add and, what does it say, and transportation, and truck parking and truck compounds, including public transportation depots. So that takes it a bit more broadly. So the way staff are looking at this is there's 3 independent uses. There is the movie-related uses, and I don't want to say studio because that sounds like there's something permanent, but there's movie uses, there's commercial vehicle uses, and then there's truck uses. And as was referenced before, those are independent uses, very similar to some of the existing uses where we have public works depots, recycling depots, those things that could be started tomorrow without any reference to council. Staff were being careful with this to actually make sure that some of these related but extended uses were brought to council's attention so they'd be aware of them and we wouldn't trip upon it. But as was referenced before, definitively, there are some uses on the P5 designation that would be very similar to these uses, if not encompassing them.
Okay, speaking to the motion, the amendment, I don't want to not. I think from what you explained, I need to vote against the amendment. But that means that commercial vehicles may park there with different rules than the one in Aldergrove. They've got to have special environmental things in place so that leakage of motor oils, and if somebody goes in and washes their truck or changes, because a commercial truck spot lot it has different rules than this will have. Is that right?
No, I think that's correct. I'm not aware of any of the degree to which you're suggesting some of these have, because there are some on industrial lands that are in industrial areas that have some of the provisions. But the challenge we face in these areas is to provide those amenities, if you will, require, again, further investment that would be more conducive to a permanent one. That would mean then council would be bound to that on a permanent basis. And we're looking at this very much like some of the other uses. A public works yard, for example, a recycling process, just like the facility that's there now for the Metro Vancouver folks that are there. They don't have any of those because of their history. This being temporary would mean if it was successful in council's eyes, it could be revisited later.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think you've clarified. I think we're trying to do a good job here, and I think with the motion that goes, the motion we're talking to, I can't vote for it but I feel like I want to because of environmental problems. But okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Long, on the amendment.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the difference is.
Oh, hang on, sorry. There you go.
What's the difference between a movie truck and another truck? I mean, the trucks are trucks, aren't they? Maybe Mr. Backen can explain this other part. Maybe this would cover this, because it says as a condition of the permit. First of all, it's the permit that needs to be modified, not the recommendation, right? And so on the permit, it talks about, in the report, it says, a security is required to ensure that the use permit is carried out in accordance with the terms and conditions. And then some $100,000 has been put up. So that can you, maybe through you, worship to staff, can you explain how that could maybe help us if this became something that was untoward, what we're trying to allow them to do?
You're correct. Prior to issuance of the permit, there has to be bonding put up to deal with some of the concerns that may be raised. Again, this is a bit of a unique site environmentally because of its history and the fact that the fill and the material that's there now being effectively capping the site. So the provision of the security allows us then to actually, if there is an issue, to monitor and take action, likely with the proponent's support, but that's one of the ways we're trying to mitigate the risk for such a short period of time.
Yeah, and the permit talks about that they agree to be very cooperative should we need to do something. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think that, I would prefer that we keep it a bit more general for the kinds of trucks and vehicles that can go there. I don't think we should limit it just to vehicles that relate to one particular industry. We have a significant need for truck parking in this community. This is a good location. It's on a temporary basis, so I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, well, I'm going to make a prediction here that 3 years from now, there won't be anything parked on that thing that's related to the film industry. If we don't contain the uses to the film industry, you are opening it up for a secondary use to become the primary use. And that's what's going to happen here, and that's what I think is wrong.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do really resonate with the comments about the need for truck parking. Obviously, I think in hindsight, we would say, for example, Gloucester should have had a lot of truck parking in and around the area when the land values were such that we could have purchased something. Nobody likes the idea of a trucker having to drive inordinate amounts of time, safety, all of these kind of things. In other countries, such as the U.S., the federal government actually requires this as infrastructure, and it's paid for by the public purse in the knowledge that we do need trucks and that we do have to have safe compounds and places for people to have a shower and go to the washroom, etc. So I'm supportive of that. I don't think we can really equate this with that, but by default, if this is what we have, I guess I struggle with a similar issue about the degree to which we can prescribe the business plan of those who want to use this property for 3 years and say only maybe a percentage of the trucks can be outside of the scope of the film industry. I have no idea what kind of trucks would, do vans qualify? Do food vans qualify? What about reefer trucks? What about all these other kind of trucks? I think what's lacking in terms of detail, for my understanding of this whole proposition, is, to what degree do we have any assurance, as Councillor Richter has mentioned, that over the course of time there aren't going to be, it's just going to be truck parking, basically, and to fill a need. And maybe that's not wrong, but is this the correct place to put it, would be my question. And do we want to really encourage this use in the absence of making any other kind of policies to create other opportunities? So I'm wondering if it's possible, through your worship, to Mr. Back, and if we can make an amendment to put in some kind of, rather than a blanket prohibition or just to say we only will have film trucks, what about limiting it to a percentage of them? Like 80%, for example, something along those lines.
Your Worship, I understand the sentiment. It'd be very difficult to distinguish between a film truck and a non-film truck. There's some size issues, certainly. I mean, sometimes they're smaller. But if you're having large materials delivered or whatnot, they would look effectively the same as trucks themselves. And as well, the other problem would be monitoring. I'm not quite sure how one would actually be able to get inside the trucks themselves to make that monitoring. So I'm just being very, very cautious in terms of, I don't want to create the impression that we can distinguish among types of trucks as opposed to the trucking usage itself. It would be a very challenging thing to try to put into a motion.
My thought is guard stations and places where people actually, for security reasons, have to pass back and forth are sometimes helpful in this regard.
True enough. The question is then, is each truck stop then to be inspected, and what are the privacy concerns about so doing in terms of bills of lading and those pieces? I'm just trying to get my head around how that could be done, because effectively it would be like a longshoreman operation where the containers or the trucks would come in, they'd be opened and reviewed and then passed on, and that's a pretty extensive function only because of the federal government undertakes that. I mean, it could be done, I think, in theory, but it would take some more thought.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on the amendment, I'm going to call the question. The amendment fails with Councillor Ferguson, Whitmarsh, Kuntz, Mayor-Froze, Councillors Long, Arneson, Woodward, and Davis opposed. So we're back to the main motion. I had Councillor Long on the speaker's list for a second time.
No, I managed to cover that with the $100,000 deposit.
And Councillor Davis, you're on the speaker. You're good? Okay.
I was playing.
So on the main motion, I'm calling the question. Carries with Councillor Richter opposed. All right, move on to E3. It's Agricultural Land Commission application number 100399, West Creek Farms Limited. Could I have a motion, please? Sorry. E3. Okay. So, yeah, so it's, so it's moved, it moved with A. So, Councillor Davis, your hand was up so fast, so that's what you wanted? And I'll have, okay, no, but you moved A? Councillor, okay, we better, you quickly moved, so I was just wondering. Yes. Okay, Councillor Long seconds. Okay, we'll go that route. It was a kind of a race to the motion.
Everyone says I move pretty slow, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's happening today? You have coffee or what?
Okay, I've got Councillor Arneson. Actually, Councillor Davis, you did move it, so if you did want to speak first, I'll give you that opportunity. Otherwise, Councillor Arneson. Do you want to speak first, Councillor Davis? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm going to support sending this to the ALR based on agricultural merits. I don't say that lightly because I've seen lots of reports that they base it on agricultural merits, but and I want to argue about it. But this is, I'm going to support it based on agriculture merit. This is a direct connection to agriculture and food production, and I'm going to tell you why. In my opinion, I went down, had a site visit. I've been there a few times anyhow. Maybe a little bit of history I got was 30 years ago or so, major veggie greenhouse growers used to make their own growing medium. And growing medium is the soil found in the little pots where they stick the tomato plants or the cucumber plants in. And it has to be a consistent quality medium, and it's very complicated, and growers need to focus on producing a quality product to have that medium. Example, on my dairy farm, my dad and I used to wing it. Well, we know that the neighbor did it this way, and we know how we can get more milk production, and then all of a sudden things are imbalanced and other unintended consequences. So 30 years ago, we went with a nutritionist. And the nutritionist came in, and with his experience, he was able to keep our cows milking consistently, healthy. We had different diets for our lactating cows, and all that. Now, I'm not getting off subject, but the growing medium is the same thing. Greenhouse growers, if they can get a good, consistent medium, they can stay in their greenhouse and do what makes them money. And that's why West Creek can provide a good growing medium. West Creek Farm produces a medium significantly created on their farm for the growing needs of growers. I learned that there is a special medium for growing tomatoes, cucumbers. They have many, many different recipes. You can see where I'm going. They have control there. This allows the grower to go into the greenhouse and grow and focus on what he needs to and not worry about the medium that comes in there. Anyhow, they grow, they produce medium for some of the leading greenhouses in the valley. Surrey, Surrey Coastal Floral. This quality of the product is also dependent on the consistency of every batch of growing medium. The strength of the floral industry in BC is dependent upon support services such as West Creek Farms, Rainbow Greenhouses. It is essential for the horticulture greenhouse sector to rely on blended soils to meet the daily needs of fresh and timely soil supplies each year. Pan American, they're a big grower. West Creek, they're in Surrey. West Creek Farms provides a valuable and necessary service to the greenhouse necessary. I think you get the idea. We got DeVry right here in the Township of Langley. West Creek Farms to supply them with a premium soil blend to grow the best possible quality of plants, and West Creek has a big part of their success. So you can see it's connected. They have a reliable supply of optimum growing medium blends to for debris. Maybe I've got 3 or 4, but this will be the last one. Dervonda, we know where that is. That's right in Langley. Dervonda now also produces 1.3 long English cucumbers on 10 acres of grass. They couldn't do that if they couldn't get the quality. Okay, 1.6 million hothouse tomatoes on 2.5 acres. I can remember when Bill Vanderzam built a greenhouse, I used to go and help him for free. And I used to eat more tomatoes than I did. But you can see the connection to the media, to the food production. Okay, you know what, I'm just gonna carry on here. West Creek employs about 15 to 18 people and uses on-site, they have an on-site laboratory, they take me for a tour. And this is to guarantee a consistent medium product with, I don't know if it was hundreds of recipes, but a lot of recipes. They ship as far as Mount Vernon, United States, and as west to Vancouver Island and points east from here. Okay, truck traffic has been there for 30 years. They have a fleet of trucks, but when you are a food producer, you have to have trucks. It's an essential part of food production, and I'm not trying to tease anybody here, but when you have a turkey farm, trucks got to come in and take it out. Grain comes in. Trucks are a part of producing agriculture. They've worked hard on their environmental impact, having hired David Malinchuk as an environmental consultant. And I've written some of the comments, and I think you got the idea. The industry depends on a steady supply of quality, custom, tailored growing media. It does. So, in conclusion, I'm going to support this to the ALC for their consideration because I feel it's an essential link to food production, and I will be supporting the ALC on agricultural merits. And I might have missed a few things that I had on my tour, but Dembo, we gave them a permit to bring sawdust into Langley, and it was mentioned earlier, I get sawdust from Dembo. If I'm in the agricultural industry and I start losing my veterinarian service, my custom operator, and they're all going to Alberta, then I have a hard time operating. So that's why I want to see this company carry on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for that information. I think I've been enlightened. I think if I can get a good medium to grow my turkeys, and you for your calves, it might be better. I know.
That was an example of the
Because that's what went wrong the first time I planted them too deep. Okay, no, it's just a kidding. Councillor Arneson.
As long as they didn't come frozen out of a helicopter, you'll be fine.
That's right.
That was WKRP.
Yes.
That was one of the highlights of their show that I recall. Thank you, Worship. I actually am going to support this application, but I did have some kind of questions, and I appreciate that Councillor Davis has done a lot of due diligence in delving into this. I think one of the challenges that we have in the township is just the disposition of where some of these entities are, and the fact that they're governed by another level of government that has somewhat, in my opinion, arcane rules about what can be where. So if we're allowing something that is more or less essential for a number of farming operations, I agree with Councillor Davis. We're very challenged then to think, well, where are they going to come from? Are they going to come from across the line? Are they going to come from Chilliwack? Are they going to come from places? No, we want them locally. And I think our agricultural viability strategy speaks to that, and Council did endorse that strategy. But the challenge for me in some ways is this idea, and I'm going to ask a question through your worship to Mr. Backen. I want to know about the zoning, because it indicates here that what they're currently doing and need to have dispensation to continue to do is not allowed under this RU5 zoning. So what would be the process, if it was deemed advisable, that they would wish to go forward, maybe not now, but maybe in the future, and actually acquire the necessary zoning? What would that entail?
Your Worship, I'll have to have Mr. Seffi help me, but I think what they're saying is that while it is arguable they could fit under the RU5 zoning, the Land Commission would be looking at this as a non-farm use, and as such, then it must have their approval prior to it advancing. If we determined that the RU5 zoning did not embrace or include what they are putting forth, it would require a rezoning in and of itself in terms of to some sort of, I guess, some sort of designation that would include this sort of use. And in all likelihood, if that was the case, we'd probably have a hard look at a text amendment just to simply add this sort of use on some restricted basis to the RU5 zone. But Mr. Sefi, in terms of the designation, in terms of our zoning, how is it looking?
Thank you, Your Worship, for the opportunity. The process would be as follows. After Council decides on whether it wishes to refer this to the Land Commission or not, subject to the approval of the Agricultural Land Commission, the applicant would then would be required to apply for a land use amendment. So it does require a zoning bylaw amendment, whether it's a simple text amendment or otherwise, subject to Council's approval, the ALC approval. There will be a subsequent process to determine to deal with the land use issue. I suppose this could have been addressed as a one-step process, as opposed to the way it's being presented as a two-step process. So this is, at this stage, the first step of a two-step process, this being referral to the Agricultural Land Commission to determine whether Council and then the ALC approve of the non-farm use being permitted on that land, and if so, then subsequently a land use amendment or a rezoning bylaw amendment would be required to allow for the use to occur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sefi. That's very helpful to know that it is an integrated part of this proposal if it goes forward to the Agricultural Land Commission, which it seems that likely will. I just had one other comment about this, and I know it's tangential to what this actual application, but I can't help but notice when I'm driving through Fort Langley and then go down along River Road, because we have increasing, I'll call them industrial uses along the strip, along the river, we have not resolved, I want to remind Council, our issue about truck traffic going through the historic downtown core of Fort Langley. This is going to cost a lot of money for us to remedy, and I don't know, it seems that we just kind of wrestle around with this, but nothing ever comes of it. But I do think that there is some merit in having some discussion about the scope of the industrial uses that we have and finding some mechanisms so that we can help to get some offsetting payments so that we can reroute the traffic from the downtown core. I think it's a chronic problem that we have. I think we need to address it. So hopefully the next council will consider that there's some merit in doing that. I'm not going to vote against this. I think this is a good idea and we need it for farming. But I certainly can't help but look at the cumulative effect of what we've allowed to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, we've come a long way from farming to designing a truck route for Fort Langley at whatever. Okay, so I wanted to say that Councillor Davis, that's the longest submission you've had this term. And we don't like. I'm not going to try to beat it today, no way. I do have I'm familiar with the area. I'm in the area all the time. I have friends and I just know the area. So my question through the chair of staff, if we were not a regulated community, would we be able to do this through our normal either policy or rezoning process, if I may, through the chair?
Your Worship, the short answer is we would have more flexibility, but we would still need ALC approval. The added complication is, and again, it depends how we process the RU5 issue as to the use of the property, that may require the Minister of Agriculture's, consent to make that change when the time comes. And it may not, because we have some latitude, but regulated communities, generally, if there's going to be a zoning bylaw that affects farm use, must have the ministerial approval, and that's something we'd have to sort out through part of that process.
My last comment to Councillor Davis is our friend David Melnichuk also advises on agriculture uses as well as environmental. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, I think that's all been answered, but I wanted to confirm, because it is a two-step process, so we need to send it to ALC first, and then it comes back. There has to be the zoning text, and I guess, Mr. Backen, you did answer that about the having to write to the minister, I suppose. So there's still plenty of hoops to go through, I guess, besides this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further questions. I'll call the question on E3. Carries unanimously. Okay. All right, move on to E4. And this is the 2021 audited consolidated financial statements and the 2021 annual report and 2021 statement of financial information. There is a clerk's note. I trust everyone has seen it. So this needs to be moved in two parts. The first paragraph is the first motion I would require, and that's to deal with the editing change. Councillor Kuntz moves it. Councillor Whitmarsh seconds. No discussion. I'm going to call the question on E4. That carries unanimously. And then the second part, which would be then to approve the report and the Sophie report. Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Kuntz. See no discussion. I'll call the question on the second part of E4. Carries unanimously. And move on now to bylaws for first and second reading. F1 is official community plan amendment and rezoning application number 100227 and development permit application number 100940, Qualico Mitchell Williams, bylaw 5791, bylaw 5792. For first and second, Councillor Ferguson moves it. A seconder. I have a second. Councillor Whitmarsh. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just had a question of clarification. And it seems to me we're amending the official community plan and the Williams neighborhood plan. And I'd just like to ask staff, what will be the increase to the plan's projected population as a result of this amendment?
Mr. Steffi.
Thank you, Your Worship. The answer to the question is nil, zero. The amendment to the plan is triggered by the need for adjustments to the parking requirements and not the density requirements, the density provisions, I should say, of the plan. And what I mean by that is, Your Worship, that's why I'm trying to put this slide on the screen so that council can take a look. The Williams neighborhood plan is actually one of the latest neighborhood plans that council has adopted, and has some very specific and explicit requirements, prescriptive, I should say, that's the word I was looking for, requirements to do with parking. As an example, it prohibits tandem parking. So in order for a unit to have the ability to have a basement suite, the parking requirements would then trigger the need for either tandem arrangement or a request to vary the plan. And this is exactly what the applicants have done. So with this slide, you can see the 22 lots being proposed. There are 10, I believe, to the north and 12 to the south. And in order for the applicant to be able to accommodate basements in the 10 northerly lots, they need to have a council, provision, the council consideration of amendment to the plan, to the the Williams neighborhood plan, that would then allow them to have the tandem arrangement. Otherwise, they cannot accommodate the 4 parking stalls required on site, on each site, unless there is one tandem arrangement. So what they plan to do is, I don't know if we have the slide here. I recognize it's hard to see, but again, looking at the northern area, you see the 3 cars being parked on the lot, and then there's one additional one to accommodate the basement suite that is in a tandem arrangement with one of those three parking stalls. So that is the variation to the Williams plan that the applicant has been required to apply for in order to make the application work.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. So just to clarify, there's no density here, it's just parking. So to put the basements in, we could have basement suites. And if we have basement suites, then we're gonna have more density. But, did that make sense, or am I kind of?
Yeah, I think basement suites are considered, Mr. Seffi, if you could maybe just clarify the zoning for that area for those homes if they're already considered with basement suites.
That's correct, Your Worship. With single-family dwellings, basement suites are inherently permitted. As long as other zoning bylaw requirements are being complied with, they are allowed with single-family dwelling units that are detached.
Is this the first application we've had in the Williams?
Yes, it is, Your Worship.
So already we're starting to, yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'd be interested in obviously hearing everything that Council has to say with respect to this. Further to Councillor Davis' question, yes, this is the first application that we're having in the Williams Neighbourhood Plan. I actually have some concerns around this, and I don't know how to address them at this stage. I do understand that it would have to be going forward for public consultation through a public hearing, etc. But I would note in particular that these are somewhat substantive changes in a very novel kind of planning mode, I would call it. It's called the transitional zone. So the transitional zone here is really, I think, what is in play in the sense of how do we make our requirements for affordable housing and a variety of housing fit within this particular area. And so apparently how we can do that is to make changes to the parking and do different things. But I'm looking at this and saying, on the one hand, I'm supportive of secondary housing. I couldn't say no to that. But on the other hand, I think that there's many missed opportunities here. So I look at the tandem parking, the road closure that's included, loss of significant trees, and in fact, the laneway proposition that's on offer, I really think we've missed the mark there in terms of putting green shading trees or some kind of accommodation there for vegetation. People who live in those areas shouldn't be devoid of having any tree canopy, in my opinion, in their yard. I know people who live in coach houses in Surrey, over in Clayton. That's exactly the situation that they face. So not only don't they have the aesthetics of some kind of green alley or access situation, they also lack any trees and can just, overlook the landscaped area that belongs to the primary house on the property, if that's what the situation is. So I actually want to send this back to staff. I want to address these issues because I think that this is not necessarily the way that I want to start out on the Williams Neighbourhood Plan. I think I'd like to do some tweaks to it before we start to endorse these kind of efforts. Many of them are very wonderful. I like the tree muse. I like many of the things about it, but I'm not necessarily supportive of and don't think it should remain unexamined, these other issues that I think could be enhanced. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Your Worship, perhaps just another maybe way of saying what I said earlier, just for clarification purposes, there are no designation changes being proposed or contemplated. The only change to the neighborhood plan is to allow for tandem parking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, I'm going to call the question on F1. Carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis opposed. Move on to F2, Official Community Plan Amendment and Rezoning Application Number 100191 and Development Permit Application Number 101027 and 101213. This is Qualico Mitchell Williams. Bylaws 5786 and 5787. Could I have motions, please? Motion? Councillor Long moves it. Councillor Whitmer seconds it. Discussion. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the same question as I asked the last time. This is an amendment to a brand-new neighborhood plan, and I'd like to know what the plan's estimated population, how it will change as a result of this amendment.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Seffi, if you could explain the OCP amendment and
Yeah,
answer
and
the question.
Mr. Mayor, I do
Yes.
have another question. On page 17, it talks about the trees to be removed for the single-family homes, and there's only 7 of them. but there's no reference to the number of trees that will be removed for the townhomes, and I was just wondering why not.
Sure, okay. Mr. Seppi.
Thank you, Your Worship. So perhaps the second question is a bit easier to address. I'll respond to that first. And that is the need for a development permit process, Your Worship, which the applicant has chosen not to proceed with at this point. So we do not have a development permit application for the townhouse site that will determine the form, siting, and character and the location of buildings, which then has a direct impact and relationship with trees. So that will be a matter of future council decision and discussion. And as far as the first question is concerned, Your Worship, I guess similar to the first or the previous application that was on the agenda, this is also an application that does not affect the density calculation of the Williams plan. And why that is because of the range of densities that are provided within the plan that is not actually being exceeded. And perhaps I don't have the table that I can show council as a slide, and the table is actually included in the council report. Maybe I can just draw council's attention to page 13 of the report, wherein the range that I just referenced is specified between 302 to 372 units. That is the existing permissible density range of the Williams plan. And the applicant is actually, the actual development yield is within that range at 334, which is 327 townhouse units plus 7 single-family units.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. This is the second application, and we're, not to get my math a little off, but this is almost a quarter of the development on the south side of 80th. Almost a quarter. I also did look at page 13, and I guess I got lost in the numbers, but this current plan wants a total of 372 units. The proposed plan wants a total of 432 units. It goes from 150 to 375 to 162 to 432 units. The more units you put in, the more people, right? I don't know how that's how that can't mean that they're asking for more density.
Your Worship, perhaps just a quick point. If I can draw your attention to the last column where it says development yield. So that is the actual yield, the number of units that is being proposed by this application. And the number at the bottom there is 334. The 334, which is 7 plus 327, is within the existing range of 302 at the lowest end to 372 at the highest end. That's what I was referring to earlier.
Okay, so that means that it's within the plan.
That's correct.
Why is it here?
Because there are shifts that are being suggested or being contemplated, proposed, because of several things, including the provision of school and park site. So that is one significant, I guess, driver. As you can see, the area that is now being shown as blue and green for school and future park site were not shown as such in the plan. So this yellow, light yellow triangle, or not rectangle here, square, is now becoming school and future park sites. That is one reason. The other one is because of the road realignments and road requirements, I should say. That is, I guess, was not based on the fact that the neighborhood plan level, we don't have the actual detailed layout of developments. The level of detail that is now available is now allowing us to look at it a bit more in a more detailed way. and as such, looking at a different way of using different areas and coloring different areas, if you will.
Yeah, okay, so then when we voted on it, we didn't have much detail. So I shouldn't have voted on it then, because I need to know that detail. I'm being cheeky now, okay, that, you don't need to answer me there. I'm concerned that, this isn't gonna be affordable housing. This, I know it's just going to a public hearing. I don't know, like, if we make a plan, why don't we stick to the plan instead of, you know, what happens is it creates an awful lot of stress on the plan. You know, it affects drainage, roads, traffic, parks. Like, it was almost impossible to get a 5-acre park out of this place. I tried, you know, and I'm just concerned that I thought we made this decision when we voted on the Williams plan. It was all right there. All the ledgers say what it's going to be. And anyhow, I don't want to not vote against it, but I'm just concerned that it's here. Like, if we have a plan, why are we here looking to change a little bit of it? Oh, thank you very much. Over.
Thank you. Just one of the explanations is the park sites and school sites aren't detailed at the outset, and there's good reasons for that because of a lot of moving parts. And then what it is, I think it triggers a lot of these things. So there's some fluidity in it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to get a question through to staff on the orphaned property on the corner. Pretty helpful to have this slide up already. The 21216 80th Avenue. What I'm sensing here is that dealing with that's going to fall to the taxpayer. I just had a question through Mr. Backen if there's been any discussions to have that incorporated with this development, either through the developer proponent or via the township.
Mr. Backen.
Thank you, Your Worship. There has been lots of discussions on that property because, of course, it's an important one for the geometry of the road to go through. And what we're experiencing is, I guess, a matter of expectations versus reality. Where we stand right now is that the property is not part of the application because the owner did not wish it to be so. Having said that, though, I believe that the applicant before you will be in a better position, I think, to determine their final position vis-a-vis that property with the certainty of what these rezoning applications may bring. That being that if they are advanced, then there'll be a certain economic, I guess, structure that will help them determine what they can actually do in terms of trying to acquire that property. And it is a condition of, it will be a condition, I suppose, of any final reading that matter be resolved prior to final reading being granted.
Okay, so maybe you can help me because I must have missed that in the conditions. Can you maybe highlight if that's going to become a condition?
Your Worship, perhaps I can just assist. It's condition number 6.
Number 6.
Provision of road dedications, widenings, and unnecessary traffic improvements, including realignment of the intersection of 80th Avenue with 212th Street in accordance with the Township's Master Transportation Plan.
Yeah, so then that confuses me then. Okay, so that's great that that's been highlighted, but how would that be achieved if the individual will not sell? And then if the township doesn't get involved, how would that condition ever be met? And then the second question is, then why the requirement for the easement, which is contemplating that property developing separately?
Steffi.
So, Your Worship, I'll start with the first one. So, in that position, it would effectively mean that the development could not proceed until such time as that matter is resolved. So, they could be sitting at following third reading for quite a period of time. The township could elect to become involved, but again, it depends upon the price and the cost and what that would actually look like. The challenge, I suppose, would be the alternative to that would be if we were to try to acquire the road at this moment, which is possible, but then that takes some of the cost burden off the developer. Mr. Seffi, did you wish to address the second part?
I don't know if I caught the second part, Your Worship. Perhaps
the need for the easement. So, like, the concern is it'd be nice to see that corner incorporated into the development and addressed now. as opposed to it being orphaned and then left to the taxpayer. So there's an easement condition here, I can try to find the number again, that there's a provision to get to that property through the subject. So it's contemplating that it could potentially develop separately. Is that correct?
Well, Councillor, sorry, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Woodward, as Mr. Backen referenced, the requirement currently requires the applicant that is the subject of this report to proceed with the acquisition of the road realignment. That means that it could potentially not be resolvable. In other words, the application could sit for a long time and not be granted final reading because of the fact that they cannot achieve or negotiate an agreeable solution to this issue. And as such, it is not currently contemplated that what you refer to as the orphaned lot to be developed as part of this application. In fact, they have I think, indicated to the applicant that they do not wish to proceed with the application at this point. So what that means is that at a future date, the application could come back in a different form, or a variance could come to council to suggest that there's an alternative way of dealing with the traffic issues, given the fact that the parties have not been able to achieve a solution that meets all of their needs and their interests, and then I guess the interim solution, or the proposed revised solution, if in fact is permanent as opposed to interim, would then be viewed at that point.
Okay. Maybe we just leave this now for first and second, because I might have to go back and watch the video to try to understand that. Because what I'm just trying to get down to is an outcome for the taxpayer around road infrastructure that, with the easement in place and potentially the wording of 6, there could be the potential that you have this development, this property essentially become uneconomic given the ratio of road dedication, widenings, and intersection requirements and greenway requirements in line with the densities on it. And so how does it get resolved without suggesting that maybe the township has to get involved to deal with it? And I think I brought this up a number of times over the years, that what are we doing about this intersection when you see how much of that lot is lost to road dedication? We've allowed developers in some of their cases to proceed not solving these problems, and then it'll eventually get stuck with the taxpayer solving it. So I don't know, maybe I'll ask, so maybe in between now and the public hearing, how number 6 prevents that from happening, because it seems to be worded in such a way that potentially there would be some other alternatives where they could proceed without completing or acquiring this property for the purposes of development. Is there anyone you want to add to that, or should I just go back and watch the video?
Thank you.
Try to understand.
Your
what you
Worship,
said.
maybe 2 points. The first one, or the second one, I should say, the first one I want to respond to at this point was the second point that Councillor Woodward raised, and I was a bit confused because I wasn't sure exactly which specific condition Councillor Woodward was referring to. As I understand it, it might be number 12. Maybe Councillor Woodward can clarify. Registration of an easement providing access over the subject lands. Is that the one?
I'm trying to find it here. I did circle it. There was specific. No, it's number 7, restrictive covenant to secure an interim access condition. That's also, that's a different property, sorry. So I'm trying, there was one in here regarding an easement.
Yeah, that's number 12, I think.
Number 12, yeah.
Easement providing access over subject lands. That's 21216 80th Avenue.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So if it is that one, Your Worship, then it's actually an easement on the subject lands, not on the other land which is not part of the application, but rather on the subject land, and is actually for the benefit of the parcel which is outside of the subject area.
Yeah, no, I understood that, and I can see the need for it. The problem is if this proceeds, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, based upon number 6, this proceeds irrespective of not requiring the proponent on a development of this size, 30 acres, to not provide the road infrastructure required by people to get in and around the development. They could potentially proceed, and we end up again with a an unfinished intersection in this area. So I think maybe we don't have to worry about that today, and worry about that maybe further at third. Maybe there's more that can be provided to council on what some of the options are to allow the development to proceed, but strengthen the language around requiring this problem to be solved. Because we see this again and again and again in Willoughby, given the current policy structure. I wanted to move on to, if I may, Mr. Mayor, with this slide here, asking about the single-family lots on the park, and where this came from in terms of this requirement to place that there. Was that a desire to see some mixture of single-family housing within the proposal, or is this coming from the proponent trying to put lots on a park?
Your Worship, it is an application by the proponent that we're responding to. So this was presented, and staff believe that it has some merits in terms of not only addressing the fairly significant requirement for 10 acres of a joint school and park site, but also providing for some, I guess, way for the proponents to be able to meet that significant obligation and requirement for the community. So it is a proposal by the applicant, the proponent, that we're responding to, and it has some merits, and it provides for the provision of the school and park site.
Okay, so I think, of course, in some cases, proponents tell me that they do what they're told to do, right? So I'm just kind of curious if this is something that staff are advocating for, the proponent is advocating for, because I'm curious about the fact that they're front-loaded, and that's something I thought within Williams Neighborhood Plan we were trying to move away from.
Right, yeah.
That'd be a question.
Well, in a lot of cases where there are parcels fronting, in particular, collector and arterial roads, yes, the preference would be to have rear-loaded lots. But just, I guess, a more general comment, Your Worship, in terms of the process that staff follows is to, at first, require all the major prerequisites to development proceeding that are identified in the plan, in naval plan. Subsequent to that, then, will become some more specific requirements that are not specifically identified, but rather become evident, or the need for them becomes evident as part of the review process. That then is an example of that. Then is the road connectivity, and the need for that is identified as strongly as we can, and based on historic language that we have used in number 6. But if council wishes to make any amendments to that, certainly that is something that is within council's discretion. And ultimately, what I was trying to say earlier was that if at some point the applicant comes and stands in front of council and says, look, I'm unable to acquire this, I am unable to meet this requirement because the other party is actually not being reasonable. What I was trying to say earlier was that council always has the ability to change that requirement and provide for either interim solutions or some other way of making that work.
Yeah, okay. So I'm wondering, because it seems like, again, another question, Mr. Mayor, if I may, is in regards to the fact that there isn't a development permit here. So would it not be possible for council to say that we would prefer that park be contiguous and unencumbered for township and the residents, and then also for the residents across the street to have an access to that park, which isn't essentially a greenway, which I don't like very much. I've not seen this before. Maybe there is precedent for it, but I've not seen it before. But without the cost of a development permit attached to this, and some of that having been worked out, would it not be possible, say, for the township to simply, or the council, to pass an amendment, maybe at third, to increase the number of units across the street in the townhouse areas, proportionate to the need for those 7 single-family lots? So, and see that density on the other side of the street in a configuration that they haven't actually completed yet. Is that a process that might work?
Mr. Safi?
Yes, a couple of comments, Your Worship. The first thing is the requirement for a 5-acre site for a school and a 5-acre site for a neighborhood park, and the applicant is currently meeting that requirement. That said, council certainly can direct that the 7 lots be not as shown and located somewhere else, or not at all. Certainly within. Yeah.
Or simply increase the requested density in the townhouse, the
Elsewhere.
areas, proportionate to the value of those 7 lots to make the economics work. That might be something.
That's correct,
That's
yeah.
correct. So perhaps if the proponent's watching or paying attention to this, they could potentially reach out to council and let us know what that might look like. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst. Hang on.
Yeah, I just had a question. I noticed that the CACs were calculated, and I think these properties fall under the WRCAP policy. I was just wondering if there's any calculation on, as to what might get put into that WRCAP policy.
The fund?
Yes.
Mr. Seffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. The calculations for CACs are fairly more straightforward, formulaic than the WRCAP calculations, and that's why staff do include the CAC collectible amounts per policy, and the WRCAP one is a little bit more tricky to actually outline in a staff report, because it does involve calculations of what is actually being provided, because what's being provided needs to be deducted from what's payable, and that can only occur when more detail is available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. I appreciate the questioning of this area, in particular, Councillor Woodward referencing the fact of these single-family residential units that are along. I just support this idea that there has to be some kind of remedy for that, because I'm also not very familiar with the fact that this is something that we do and that it could be offset elsewhere. But through your Worship, I had a question, I guess, to Mr. Safey. I'm becoming concerned to some degree. I know we've had this discussion before about the relocation of waterways, and there is some rationality that in order to get land yields, we have to take existing water courses and a variety of different coated streams and irrigation, whatever, and put them into a different direction in order to make the land viable for development. But I'm wondering, and at what point are we going to see through our climate action lens what a best management practice, what does that look like? Because I understand SPIA, so I guess I'm anticipated to take a good faith attitude that everything that we're doing so far in light of a changing climate is actually going to be successful in terms of managing our water courses and streams. But I would like some reassurance that we are looking at that on a regular basis and have a more robust or up-to-date policy regarding what that looks like, because I don't see anything in this report that indicates that, for example, this is a best management practice in terms of the actual water course itself, not in terms of developable yield, but for the sake of the water course. That's a question.
Okay.
I put a question mark at the end.
A question mark. Mr. Seffi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hesitate because I'm not sure how to respond, how to best respond, because we try to provide reassurance to council. I reiterate that reassurance to council, and I hope that council can accept our word as staff that we are perhaps not on the leading edge of best management practices, but close to it. The fact that we have a streamside protection bylaw that, the development industry as a whole has, over the years, agreed to, I guess, comply with, learn to comply with, at the beginning, maybe with some hesitation, with some issues, is an indication of the fact that this is a very thorough process that we go through. Each time that we have a streamside protection requirement, there's a development permit process that goes with it. In fact, there's a streamside protection development permit that goes with this particular application that council can take a look at and decide if it agrees with it, or if there needs to be some changes. In this particular case, there are There are, I guess, enhancements I would suggest that are being proposed as part of the streamside protection area requirements. So, yeah, I think I can just advise council that we are following best management practices. We do rely on applicants to engage qualified professionals every time in every case, and we do have our own professionals that review very thoroughly the submissions from applicants, from the applicant's team of consultants, professionals, that essentially the local government, the provincial legislation requires local governments to follow, requires landowners to follow, to make sure that there are independent qualified professionals submitting applications to local governments that are reviewed and then at some point subject to provincial approval as well.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, thank you. Well, great points brought up by fellow council members. I have some of the same thoughts around the 7 lots. Seems a little bit out of place to me, but I'm interested, I guess, to hear what happens at first and second, or at public hearing with regards to those lots there. But I had a couple of other questions, just maybe quicker ones. But the first question was regarding the realignment of the 212 and 80th intersection. Right, currently, it looks like it kind of comes down and dips down there on a section which is currently the road right now, which is 80th Avenue. And I'm just wondering, and then on the new plan, it looks like it's designated as multifamily, which is where the road currently is. I'm wondering what the plan, if that's correct, obviously multifamily, and right now that'd be township-owned land. What do we do with that relatively small piece? But it does create a section of land that becomes available. Question maybe to staff.
Mr. Sevi.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I believe the area that Councillor Whitmarsh is referencing might best be addressed as part of the naval plan itself. And you see this asterisk is showing, I believe, finding it difficult to read myself, so I'm going to have to take a look at my hard copy, public art. So there is, I guess, a vision of the plan that calls for some kind of a public area, including a public art amenity at the intersection of 212 and 80th Avenue. That is indicated with the blue asterisks there.
Okay, so the orange that it's right on top of where currently would be the roadway, that actually is not townhomes. Is that just the colors, like right immediately above that blue asterisk, it shows orange, which is currently the road. So
That's correct.
So
yes,
that's not meant to be orange.
No. If I did say that, I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Okay.
That area is, or at least at the time that the naval plan was developed. And remember, as I said earlier, perhaps not to the liking of some members of council, we don't have all the information available when we do a naval plan because there's no survey, there's no detailed design. We don't have landowners, each and every landowner and their desire for their properties all available to us. So the naval plan provides a designation that is fairly high level, not as high level as an OCP, but nevertheless still doesn't have the benefit of a survey and detailed discussions with landowners. And as such, the information that we have now would not have been available when this plan, which is on the slide, was prepared. That said, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Whitmarsh, that area that you referenced north of the blue asterisks were certainly identified as being townhomes, and they still remain as being townhomes, subject to, again, property owners and their desire for how they wish to proceed being presented to council, resulting in ultimately the vision of the naval plan as was contemplated, which shows not just multifamily north of that intersection, but also a public art amenity in that area as well.
Right, so I appreciate that. I guess I'm just thinking that the property that's immediately north of that blue asterisk is township owned because it's currently the road. So it seemed to me that we are the owners of that piece of property. I guess that's why I asked the question.
And Your Worship, that is correct. And what has been the experience in the past has been that we would entertain, as part of the discussions, negotiations with developers, with proponents, ideas about how a swap can be accommodated, and if not, how the land can be then sold, essentially. The road that is no longer needed as a result of development happening being purchased by proponents such that they can then use it as part of their development. So there would have to be a purchase and sale agreement that either contemplates monetary exchanges or land exchanges.
Okay, that's helpful. Just a second question I had. I'm looking on I'm looking on page 8, the one that it does show the school site and the park site, and on that, just immediately south of the school and park site it looks like a roadway, and yet the major road, the 78th Avenue corridor, kind of angles down. So I'm wondering what is the access or the primary access that is going to be given to the park and the school site? Is that like a school-only kind of access road that's coming directly south of the park and the school, and really only open or designed for school access and park access? It's right now it looks like a sort of a road, but it's got some angled black lines along through it. Yeah, your asterisk is right on it,
Yeah.
right there. Like, what is that a regular roadway, or is that simply like a driveway into the park and school?
I'm not sure because I don't see a legend on that. I don't know if Mr. Richardson has the answer.
The 78 collector, as I see it, comes along, hits 214th Street, and then it heads south along and then eventually joins 212. But then right across the bottom of the park and the school is this line, it looks like a roadway, but it's got some lines through it. I didn't know if that's just simply driveway access, and that would be the primary access to the park and school, or are they getting access off 214, or, you know, how do people access the park and school as a primary access point? And it looked like, I wondered if that was just a driveway, or if that's going to taken out, or what is?
I'm just going to go back to this plan, which is an able plan, and I can look and from my hard copy, again, I apologize and recognize that is not very legible on the screen, but on the hard copy, the legend is quite clear, and I think that the purple color is the one that you're referring to, Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes.
Yeah, and that is actually shown as a muse. It's a neighborhood forested muse. So the intent is to protect trees along that area. So it won't be a road. It won't be providing access to the school, but rather protect it for tree preservation, tree canopy preservation purposes.
Okay, so then the
So
school
then
and
the
park
access to the school
is
then would be from the other roads.
214. Must be off 214th Street,
Well, there are three roads,
79.
north, east, and west.
Well, yeah, I guess, except the west is across a 5-acre park. So, okay, so there's, okay, that's fine. That's helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Well, certainly an awful lot's being said here today, so I don't want to repeat. I mean, if you look at I guess the map, I bet anybody could see, well, the rendering of the applicant and the road, it doesn't seem to make sense, but now the discussion has been that it's in one of the requirements, I guess like 6 or something, and then have to follow through with some other things regarding 12. Today, we're looking at the first and second reading, and they'll have either public information, public hearing, or the requirements of the public hearing under the new government COVID public hearing requirements. So that will be the next step. And if I may, through the chair, it will be, I guess, up to council at third reading to determine how we can make either wording clearer or perhaps more beneficial to understanding the road network. If I may, through the chair?
Yes, yeah, definitely. There's an opportunity for council at any time at any reading to ask for clarification. So
that-
certainly third
that's
reading.
fine. because it's in, there was a discussion earlier on, and I know a number of councillors have spoken. So that's a second. And the park where those I know it's not in front of us right here, where those single-family lots in front of a park next to a school, again, that looks odd as well. Just by looking at the map looks odd. Now, because we're giving up that portion of the park, does that still, if I may through the chair, give us the necessary requirements for the park? That's the first one. And the second one, would that give us a supplemental payout or something, whatever you might call it, knowing how expensive land is, if I may through the chair?
So, and I think just to add to that, so it's a 5-acre dedication in park and a 5-acre dedication in school. So with those houses, it still provides for that dedication. I think that's what.
Yeah, and added to
yeah,
that would be supplemented because of the land, if I may, the housing.
Yeah, Mr. Safi, if you can, I don't quite understand the question.
So I'm not sure I understand the question, Your Worship. There's 5 acres for the school, 5 acres for the park. Those 2 5-acre pieces are being met, requirements are being met. We don't actually have any holdings there, the township doesn't, so it's all privately held. So the current concept that's being shown, that's being presented, proposed, shows a strip along the I guess the rear or the frontage, depending on how you look at it, along 79 Avenue is being shown as being single family, which was the subject of early discussion. That could either remain or be changed or just eliminated. As far as the compensation is concerned, there's only a requirement for 5 acres. That 5 acres for the school site is administered through the school district whenever they have the funding, which is subject to provincial funding, obviously. And as far as the township share is concerned for the neighborhood park, it's part of the 5% that is collected by the township at time of development. So once there is sufficient funds available, the township will pay up to 5 acres based on market value, no more, no less, 5 acres.
Okay, so well, we still have to pay it down the road, somewhere down the road. We're gonna have to pay for that park, if I may.
Yes, that's how we acquire parks.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. So I guess anyone looking at that, Mr. Safey, would understand, well, geez, here we are, the township, the public are buying a park, and yet, in our wisdom or lack thereof, we're putting a whole bunch of houses out in front of it and a small, I guess, I don't know what the park development's gonna look like or the parking's gonna look like. Oh, I don't know all that. And I wouldn't expect the staff to know that. Am I seeing that correctly, or is that something that we need to discuss further in the future, if I may?
I think that's what this discussion's been regarding those homes there. So whether council wishes to change it later, the proponent comes up with something different, as I know Council Woodward has some suggestions. That would be later, but at this point, I think it's still up in the air. This is what they have proposed, and I don't think we have to consider what's in front of us.
Yeah, I'm going to go first to second reading, Mr. Mayor, with this. And I know there'll be probably a discussion, maybe perhaps at public hearing or the way public hearings go, and then we'll decide at third reading how things go.
Yeah, no, that's great.
But actually, it's been very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Council, I just want to add one thing for Council to think about between now and when we see it again, if we do, is that having homes adjacent to a park in such close proximity really is a good septet design for those people who wish to live next to a park. I don't know if I would want to have my backyard right in a park, but there's a lot of people that do. It puts eyes on that public space, which maybe the townhouses across the street, I'm sure they'd have eyes on that too, but maybe not quite as intimate as people who live there. So it's something to think about, the septet principles, that maybe this is not seen that often, but it can be unique and it can have some benefits that we haven't quite thought of. Councillor Long.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that, because that was going to be my point. And you actually do live right by a park.
I do.
Yeah. So I think that is a very positive thing. And keep in mind, Council, that if we don't allow them to put the houses there, then you're going to have more than 5-acre park, so there has to be compensation given somewhere. But I was wondering if staff could elaborate on what you said, Your Worship, because I think it is actually a positive thing to have these houses there. We can't see Well, there are some examples of what the houses could look like in the package, but we don't have a development permit with this, so we don't know exactly what they're gonna look like. But, yeah, I think what you're saying, hopefully staff will corroborate that that is actually a SEPTEB design, and it's gonna help police the park to some extent, because there'll be houses right against it. So does staff didn't say that, because I've heard three or four councillors say that it looks odd, but can staff elaborate on that and make us feel a bit more comfortable about those houses, like the mayor is?
Mr. Sefi?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think I kind of said that in general terms earlier when I said that the application presented by the proponent did include that, but staff, as part of the review, decided that it does have some merits. And those merits are in fact partly due to the fact that there's going to be, as the mayor referenced, eyes on the street, or in this case, eyes on the park, so to speak, and certainly consistent and compliant with SEPTED rules generally to allow for again, eyes at all times of day and night to be able to have public access, a community amenity in a safe and convenient and comfortable manner.
Yeah, and I don't know if increasing the density is a good solution to try and eliminate that, and I think having them there is a benefit. Now, when we go if this goes to public hearing, it's only the land use that we'll be discussing, so there is no development permit with this, so we don't really know what the apartments are gonna look like. So when or the townhouses, so when those townhouses come forward, will there be separate public hearings for each proposal when it comes forward? So we know what it's gonna look like, or the council knows what it's gonna look like?
Yes, yeah, I see staff nodding.
So, because we used to have development permit hearings, and that's what would have to happen here. Not necessarily in one block, or would it be in portions? We don't know, I suppose. Okay, so, all right, thank you very much.
All right, I think we've exhausted the list. I'm going to call the question on F2. And it carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis opposed. Yeah, let's take a break. It's been a couple hours. Come back at 3:15. Only if you promise to not ask so many questions next time. All right, if we could reconvene the meeting, if everyone can take their seats again. Well, I know you seconded didn't you second a motion once from up there? A termination? All right, so we are now going to reconvene the meeting, and we move to bylaws for still on first and second reading, so we move to F3. And this is official community plan amendment and rezoning application number 100201, Bath Investments, bylaw number 5793, 5794, and 5803. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Kunst moves it, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Any discussion? Seeing none, call a question on F3. We're not going to give them that easy a ride, are we? Okay. If you could just make, we still have a couple of votes to make here. Councillor Davis, Councillor Arneson? Yeah, no. If you could make a note that Councillor Woodward is absent, his will come through as a positive. So it carries unanimously.
Oh, sorry, can I ask a question?
Oh, sure, I have no problem. If you want to ask a question, it's passed, but you want to ask a question, if you're here, hang on.
You know,
You-
if the ship has sailed, that's okay. But I did have some comments, so we're on F3? Yeah.
We were.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
go ahead. I'll give you that latitude.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I just, I'm wondering about this. I am supportive of this. I voted for it. But I'm wondering if there could be some conditions that were added with respect to fencing and maybe some landscaping across the front of the property as a condition?
Yeah, certainly. We still have third reading to
To
deal
do
with it.
that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I want to put it forward as something that I think would be an improvement to the aesthetics and just, you know, I've been by there a number of times and maybe some other council members have too. But I think that if it's going to go into permanent use, that would be helpful. I just want to put that on the public record. Thank
Okay,
you.
great, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have opportunities coming up. Great, thank you. All right, just gonna change the agenda. Okay, move on to bylaws for consideration at third reading. H1 is rezoning application number 100585 and development permit applications number 101263, 101233, and 101335. Coastline Engineering, bylaw number 5788. Could I have a motion on H1? I'll move it. Councillor Long moves it. Councillor Kuntz seconds it. Is there any discussion on H1? Seeing none, I'll call a question. Okay, just wait for Councillor Davis. There we go. Carries with Councillor Richter and Councillor Arneson opposed. Move on to H. Oh, that's only one. No, it's a third reading. Yep, so, yeah, we move on to bylaws for final adoption. I1 is rezoning application number 100586, bylaw number 5613. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, the seconder. Councillor Ferguson, see no discussion, call the question for I1. Carries unanimous. Oh, sorry, carries with Councillor Richter opposed. And move on to correspondence. There are two pieces of correspondence for receipt. Three, I mean, there's three. Could I have a motion? Councillor Long moves it, Councillor Arneson seconds it. I think just a show of hands on receipt. All those in favor and opposed, carries unanimously. Move on to, the mayor's report. There we go. Oh, everybody left again.
Oh, no.
Oh, did you want to?
Isn't the rail thing on here?
Yeah, okay,
I'd like to move.
okay,
I'm sure we're already
okay,
doing
just hold on, push your button. Councillor Richter, you're up. Now,
Yes,
Sorry.
I was wondering, with the BC Arrow request for funding, I'm confused as to why this would be a municipal responsibility rather than a provincial or regional responsibility. So I was wondering if if I could refer this to staff for a report
certainly.
as
Yeah.
to jurisdictions
Jurisdiction.
and how much.
Yeah, and how, and how the, it would fit in if we wanted to. We still have the discretion under a council contingency if we wish to, but it'd be good to get it for the report.
Yeah,
Yeah, so if you want to make that motion,
I will make that
is
motion.
there a seconder? Councillor Arneson. So on J1, I'll call the question on the machine here. J1. Was recorded. Carries unanimously.
Okay, and Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to discuss number 2.
Okay.
Because technically, I don't think a candidate is a declared candidate until their papers are submitted in September. So I'm wondering if we're sort of perhaps stretching the definition of declared candidate by not allowing delegations between now and September from people who have just said on Facebook that they're declaring to be a candidate. But I'm thinking that maybe the definition or the procedure bylaw needs to be specified that it's if papers have been submitted.
So
I don't want to
yeah.
get into
Yeah.
amending the procedure bylaw again.
I think we may be getting some information. So a couple ways we can go. One way is we can put the language in the policy that's more specific. That would say if someone declares that they're running for candidate in a public manner, it could be, and you know we're so reliant now on social media, but back in my day when I first started this, you made an announcement in the paper, put a nice little article out, and pretty clear you're running. So. But yes, there's also that definition. You know, how do we define it? So it could go both ways. Maybe we need a stronger definition in our policy to assist staff in making those determinations. However, council can always overrule, but then we might open the door to a landslide of political aspirants wanting to explain to us how wonderful they are. So,
Well, this,
you know.
yeah, except that the topic for this particular request for delegation pertains to an equipment purchase by the township. So to me, that's substantive input from a member of the public. So I would like to hear from Mr. Bailey, based on his expertise and the fact that it is about an equipment purchase.
So Mr. Back and I talked about, I think there's some information coming to council, but because it's dealing with
Thank you, Your Worship.
legal items, it has to be enclosed.
So in reverse order, yes, the information was received and passed on to staff, and staff are preparing a response, a memo really for council, not a response to the potential delegate. So we can actually address some of the issues that were raised, and then council can determine what the next steps are once they have that information. And that should be available at the next meeting of council. As to the process, Ms. Bauer simply pointed out that the wording of the procedure bylaw is a candidate. Doesn't see declared or otherwise, it just says candidate. And the key rule we look at then is going to be equity. So if there is to be the provision of a change to that or provision of that, it would have to apply to all parties. And right now, historically, again, this is only relevant from previous councils, historically the process has been not to have the chamber to be utilized as a potential way to get exposure, to do more things other than deal with the subject matter. And in fact, at least one member of council was previously denied a delegation on that basis some time ago. So it certainly can be reviewed and revisited. At this point, it's a bit tough because if we were to review it, it would have to be done fairly quickly. And of course, there's now, after this meeting, only 2 meetings left. So it may be something more appropriate for a future procedure bylaw, but if it's a matter of utmost importance to council, we can certainly try to address it now.
Well, it is a multi-million-dollar expenditure we're talking about, so I would like to request, or I'll move, that Mr. Bailey be invited to delegate specifically on the topic of the equipment
Thank you.
purchase.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councilor Woodward seconds it. So I'm just going to, I think we could quickly vote on this. We don't need huge debate. I think if Councilor Long.
Well, I think we do. Thank you, Your Worship. I mean,
you have the right to speak.
Thank you. And the delegation would have been, my head would have been spinning because I got his email, and it's a huge email with all kinds of errors in it, actually, as well. I thought grammatic errors. But it's been referred to staff, and it's going to come back. So, I mean, that would probably be the more appropriate way that any citizen would like to get some information about something, would write a letter to council, and council would refer it to staff, and staff would explain it to council. To come and sit in front of us isn't going to make any difference. We already have the information. We already got his email, and it's already been reported to staff. So let's just leave it there. I want to talk about rail safety, actually.
Right. Thank you. I'll get you on after this. Okay, let's move this thing through. Councilor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. This is a problem that, I guess, could be remedied by the fact that if we chose at this time as a sitting council to amend our council procedure bylaw to fine-tune it so that we're making these definitions, I would be very reluctant to do that at this late stage. As we'll all recall, council decided in its wisdom not to have any meetings in September. My understanding from our legislative clerk after a discussion is that other individuals who are also in the same position have already been denied. So what is it that we're putting forward? I'm for transparency. I want the information, but I don't know why we would be creating a situation where we have unequal treatment to individuals, because in fact, if we want to have potentially all candidates, any and all candidates, I would even include myself in that. I have not declared anywhere that I'm actually running for office. So if you'd like me to get up and speak for 5 minutes to council at the next meeting, I think that that would be fair. So we have to be fair and we have to be transparent. And I think mostly what is perturbing to me about this is we've already got the information. We will be deliberating as an elected body about the information and make a decision from there. So I don't think we're missing any opportunity whatsoever to hear about this, because these substantive details have already been forwarded to council, which I do appreciate. So I would prefer to have this in a closed meeting, and if we decide that we want to do something about it, we certainly as a council can vote to release the information if we think that there's something untoward, wrong, or in any other way problematic about what's happening in our own RFP. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, I always like to use examples. Actually, I was the one that the administrator referred to as denied council delegation last term, but it wasn't to speak on a council issue. It was to thank a long-term colleague for the time they spent on council. So I quickly got somebody else to do it for me. Got the person's daughter there and grandchildren there, and that was what that was all about. Sometimes we get caught up in too much politics and thinking that the person is not passionate about something and want to just expand themselves. I'm happy one way or another. I will support the motion for this individual to come and to speak, and we can do if this motion goes through, we always have three choices. We can listen to what the person has to say and accept it. We can accept some of it, or we can throw it all out. That's a choice we always have. I'm also of the opinion that more people speak, and even though we might have longer council meetings, that's fine. And obviously, when the actual what they call candidacy is finally open, that's different. But I think months prior, people talking about a Facebook or some other social media, that person may or may change their mind. So until they filed their papers, so that's where I stand. I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. All right, I'll call the question on J2. No, it's question, is a motion to allow the delegate. So that's what the motion is right now? To allow the... Could you please confirm what the vote is? The motion is to what's the word? Allow the delegation to present to council. Oh, I was right. Okay, so I still am waiting for two votes. Call the question. Okay. The motion fails. Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long, Councillor Arneson opposed. And so Councillor Long, you wish to speak to
Yes, so our
rail
policy,
safety.
thank you, Your Worship. In rail safety, we have a policy that we automatically support wonderful things, and so here it is. But I just wanted to point out that the CN book that I looked at when I was at FCM listed all the communities that sort of support Rail Safety Week, and we weren't listed, perhaps because they didn't know how much we appreciate rail safety. So I just wanted to make sure that staff are going to do something substantial in terms of rail safety, considering we have so many crossings in the township. It is Rail Safety Week. I don't know if staff have planned to do something on the township page or other activities which we should undertake, in my opinion. And please inform these folks that we are very much in favor of Rail Safety Week, so that we can have our name added to the list of communities and municipalities that support Rail Safety Week.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Davis.
Sorry, I wanted to clarify, are we getting CN and CP? We always seem to support CP. Maybe it isn't in the book because
We work a lot with CPN with our committee, but CN does go through. So I think staff can maybe make a note and take a look at it and let those folks. Yeah, we do, yeah. Surrey is what that, Southern Rail too. Okay, I will give my mayor's report. And good afternoon and welcome everyone. Graduation and scholarship ceremonies are once again in person. Over the last couple of weeks, council members have attended a number of these events. And I do want to thank council for all helping out. We have a lot of high schools. I've got to 2 of them, and I know others have done their share, so appreciate that. On June 14th, Acting Mayor David Davis attended the University of Fraser Valley Convocation Ceremony. Councillor Petrina Arneson attended the Walnut Grove Secondary Scholarship Award Ceremony, and I attended the White Cliff Agile Learning Center's year-end celebration. On June 15th, Acting Mayor Davis attended the second half of the University of Fraser Valley Convocation Ceremony, and I attended the Langley Senior Secondary Graduation Ceremony. Councillor Kuntz attended the Langley Christian School's graduation ceremony on June 17th. And on June 20th, Councillor Arneson attended the Langley Fundamental Secondary School's graduation ceremony, and Councillor Whitmarsh attended the Aldergrove Community Secondary School graduation ceremony. And I believe, Councillor Ferguson, you attended Walnut Grove, and that was on the council, and Brookswood. Okay, Walnut Grove and Brookswood, so I'll make sure that gets put in writing here because I realized. Okay, great, so thank you everyone. Councillor Whitmarsh and I attended the groundbreaking for the Vesta Towers project on June the 15th. These iconic towers, 126 and 134 stories, will feature nearly 500 homes and help bring the need for housing in our community. The Ministry of Education announced the funding for seismic upgrades at Peter Ewart Middle School on June 16th, and Acting Mayor Davis attended the announcement. Also on June 16th, Acting Mayor Davis attended the Provisions Market and Gifts Grand Opening Celebration and Ribbon Cutting Ceremony. On June 16th, Councillor Arneson attended the Kwantlen Polytechnic University Entertainment Arts Launch Party to celebrate the new entertainment and arts programming at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. On June 17th, it was announced that the Township of Langley and the City of Delta are co-hosts of the World Under 17 Hockey Challenge. The 8-team event will run from November the 5th to the 12th, 2022, and will feature 3 entries from Canada as well as 5 international squads, with the Langley Event Centre and Delta's Sun God Arena serving as the 2 venues. And it was good to meet with Mayor Harvey from Delta, and as we made the joint announcement. Also on June 17th, Acting Mayor Davis and Councillor Kuntz attended the Local Leadership United Harm Reduction and Overdose Prevention event hosted by the Community Action Initiative. The event provided local leaders who are interested in engaging in harm reduction initiatives and overdose prevention efforts to grow their knowledge and skills and network with the local resources, as well as provides protected time to strategize about how harm reduction is interconnected with local mandates and can support success with respect to larger goals such as public safety and homelessness. Wow, I need a few commas in that sentence, I think. I attended 3 events on June 18th, the Langley Forest Schools Teacher Retirement Celebration, Operation Thunder at the Langley Airport, an international training exercise involving pilots and aircraft owners from BC, Washington, Oregon, and California. The simulation was designed to establish methods and procedures on how to best respond in the event of an earthquake or tsunami. And Mark Werwa's Legacy Fundraiser to raise money for the Mark Werwa Legacy Fund Charity Endowment, which provides annual grants to charitable organizations focused on environmental stewardship and sustainability. I was there with Councillor Whitmarsh and Councillor Arneson, and to their inaugural. Acting Mayor Davis attended the official opening of the Donna Gabriel Robbins Elementary School, located in Willoughby, on June the 21st. Also on June the 21st, Councillors Arneson, Ferguson, and Richter attended the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce dinner meeting, where sectors that drive job creation and economic activity in the region, economic strengths that can attract business here, and how we can continue to grow this dynamic part of the region was discussed. Acting Mayor Davis attended the RCMP Mayor's Forum virtually on June the 22nd, and Councillor Long attended the ECOM AGM on June the 23rd. From June the 22nd to 26th, the Bell Canadian Track and Field Championships were held at McLeod Athletic Park. The amount of athleticism, skill, and determination these athletes had was incredible. It was such a wonderful event, and it's absolutely thrilling to have such a prestigious competition take place in our community. I'd like to thank everyone who worked so hard to make this amazing event happen, and I was attended to give the opening address and also present medals a couple of times, once on Saturday and once on Sunday. And really impressive to see. These are top Canadian athletes. These are world champions, or Canadian champions and Olympic athletes that were attending, so competing. So really a great event. Finally, on June 26th, I attended the Christian Life Assembly's Canada Day celebration. Another barbecued chicken. That was excellent. So that upcoming, we have the Township is once again going to host an in-person Canada Day celebration. And this year, the event will take place at the Aldergrove Athletic Park. There's going to be a lot of entertainment and family fun, and I hope everyone can join us at the Canada Day celebration in Aldergrove. So that is my report, and if there's anything from the rest of council, if not, we will move on. Oh, Councillor Ferguson always has something. Hope it's from Liquid Waste Committee. No?
Well, Liquid Waste should make sure that you follow the, what they call the sprinkler things, the rules and regulations. I wanted to ask if I may. First of all, I want to say on behalf of, I went to the National Track and Field Championship as well, and actually saw some of the races there, and it was great to see, because we have so much help from volunteers to the community and our staff. I'm just mentioning Steve Sheepmaker and Tab Buckner, all our union staff, our exempt staff. Just people came out, and to see that facility just vibrant on a sunny day, it was just nothing short of spectacular. And I saw a lot of the events, including the 100-meter men's and women's, and seeing those people in the training. We had two medalists there, both Aaron Brown, I think Jerome Blake, who received a silver medal in Tokyo. So watching those guys run, it was just phenomenal. The weather held out, but it's just so exciting to see that happening. I wanted to thank staff and all the work that council has done over the last, I guess, 20 years to build to the place where it is right now. Now, back to Metro Indigenous Relations, there's still the understanding that we have to work on the interpretation of the UNDRIP, which is United Nations declaring of the rights of Indigenous people, and British Columbia also has a declaration of rights for the Indigenous peoples as well. And more requests are coming in at the region. I even believe at our level as well, for input from Indigenous relations and Indigenous folks before a project is approved. And that's a water plant, a sewage plant, and in the future, I believe, and I just want to bring this to everybody's attention, zoning and rezoning. So it's important for us to stay on top of that, because the more and more I learn, the more and more I'm understanding that the response. And also, I'll use an example. One of our schools, I believe the Donna Gabriel, they asked for permission for the Indigenous, I guess, both from Catesy and from Kwantlen about what they thought of the zoning process of that. Anyway, that is my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Ferguson, did you compete in the 100-meter? I thought about it. I got so excited. I wanted to get it. So I know in 2010 you did for the BC Summer Games. The Senior Games. You did for the Senior Games, yeah. I think you'd be like still in the starting blocks when they finished, though, with this group. Yeah, it was quite amazing. Yeah, thanks for that report. I know it blew me away how improved that facility is. Yeah. And there was nothing but good I heard from people who come from all across the country, the organizers, on how great the facility was, how great the organizers were and the staff. It just, they couldn't say enough. So, yeah, really did a good job. It's an international. It's going to come again next year. It's a 2-year commitment. So, yeah. All right. So we'll move on to other business. I'm just going to clear that. And Councillor Woodward, I'll put your speaker on. There you go. You're on.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll just move the motion with one small typo repair.
Okay.
On item B, it would be 84th Avenue and 82nd Avenue.
And okay, sure.
I'll move that motion.
Moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Richter seconds. Discussion. Councillor Long.
Yeah, I mean, do we have to have a report? Can we just give direction? Because, I mean, there's an awful lot of detail in this motion. I have to go back maybe and look at the video, or there is a map handily in the package. But, I mean, I don't know if we need a report. Can't we just give this as direction to staff? I think we had a good presentation before. But there'll be ramifications if we're going to proceed with more work than we had planned. I guess we have to find money somewhere, so I don't know.
I'll ask Mr. Backen maybe, because it is, there's a lot in here. We had
Very
a
specific,
good
yeah.
presentation. Maybe Mr. Backen could just give some, from the staff perspective,
You just make it
how
so.
how this would impact what we're already doing and if it's something that.
Sure, Your Worship.
Full
At the
information.
highest level, I guess I would just conceptualize it this way, and it's a bit embellished. I think there was 9 or 10 phases, and this motion would ask us and to review as to whether or not there would be appropriate to have 2 phases going from the north to the south. In that way, there'd be delivery of, more, resources at a given time, with the theory being, and I think it's a good one, that there would then be as well the ability to get better pricing because it's a larger initiative. The challenge to it is simply that of the budget, as was referenced. That would mean we would have to get more budget funds, and in the past, we've been allocating funds basically on certain ratios of we'll say a couple $1 million a year, so that's why it takes so long. So this may take us to a larger number, but there would be some benefits to so doing, both to the residents and to the procurement process. So the real question, I think, then is really in terms of what are the best phases, and I think this does cover that, and then the question is how we pay for it, and that may be the real point of this. So if council wants just to move the motion to give us this direction, we could certainly do so, and we could bring that information to the future budget session.
So this is asking for a report. So,
Yeah, so is that, I guess that's what we're saying, there's a report. Can we just refer this to staff, or that's kind of implied already?
It's what it is, yeah. It's implied. Yeah.
Okay, well, everyone wants parks, so that's
Thank you.
good.
Councilor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. So I like a lot of the things that are identified in terms of different ways of thinking about the park and progressing maybe in a faster manner. So I appreciate those that information and the thoughts that are coming forward in this motion. What I am wondering about with regards to it is just how, the process that we engage with the public on this matter, on adjusting the phasing, timing of certain parts of it. I've had, not a lot of calls, so it's not like I'm inundated by calls, but I have had a few people that have phoned me because knowing this motion was coming forward and living in the area and suggesting that they don't want it the way that it's stipulated in this motion. That doesn't mean they're in the majority by any means. I haven't talked to a lot of people, but I'm just wondering about the process of public engagement on this. The public, certainly we agreed on the process and we're following along in that. This is a change to that. I guess I'd like to know how we engage the public on that, on getting their feedback. And it also seemed to me that this would be a great thing to send to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee as a committee that could discuss and provide input. That seems to be the purpose of those committees. So I'm not opposed to accelerating things. This is outside of a budget discussion. Of course, I'll have thoughts around the budget, but this is really around how do we engage the public to really understand what the public that lives in this area that will actively use this park. A couple of the people commented that it's a very sports-oriented park. They're concerned about lack of space for just family engagement, community engagement. One of the things that they identified as well, and it came up, primarily due to COVID and the encouragement for people to get outdoors, was the great space they could have for picnics and those sorts of things available to Yorkson. And the plan that we have here is artificial fields and so on, which isn't conducive to that kind of activity. So I like the idea that it's come forward. I think it's good that we're discussing it. I just want to make sure that we engage in the public in a really proactive way before we make decisions. I recognize this is a report from staff, but certainly once the report returns, then we'd have to engage the public to really see if this is the process and do what's best in that way. So that's, I think, my concerns. I'm probably supportive of getting a report, but not making decisions until we have good public input.
Thank you. And I'll move on to Councilor Arnson. Now, Councilor Woodward, you did move it, and I should have gone to you first if you wish to speak to it. Do you wish to wait? Okay. Councilor Arnson?
Patient. Yeah, thank you, Worship. I think I'm in agreement with that. I think we should move forward. It is a very large infrastructure project that's going to make a huge quality of life difference for the people that are moving to that area. So I'm supportive of that. So further to getting a report back from staff, I would like to consider a couple of things. So I agree that we should get public engagement as well as from the advisory committees with respect to the timing and phasing of this. So that would be helpful. I also really want to have some budget discussion. If we're going forward, I know we're having an election, but if we're going forward in 2023, and if we are going to be looking, for example, at reserves as a way to fund this, I think we need to have a concrete sense of what amount of money would be required and where it's coming from. I think that this is, we continue to dodge that ball, but I think that this is something that we need to have. And then I would like an assessment based on escalating costs. For example, I think we had to have a good idea about whether or not it's better to invest those reserve funds now and to hedge off the escalating costs and then recoup somewhere else later. But I just don't want us to have this as an unexplored conversation. But I am in support of this because I think the sooner it's completed, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in here. I appreciate that. I think the goal here isn't just that, just to finish it. Right now, it doesn't finish until 2026. I'd like to finish it. I'd like to save money by finishing it sooner. We'd all love a time machine. If we'd finished it years ago, we would have saved the taxpayer millions. That doesn't apply just to Yorks. It applies to a lot of things. I think, some of the comments there, let's not conflate a design change with accelerating the design that's in place and already approved. So if we're going to change the design, then of course we're going to do public consultation to complete the current design sooner. I'm not really following the logic or the need for that. So I'd like to, if that's going to get added to it, I think, and then if we're going to go through a revision process around some of the comments regarding, not liking the design or the sports-heavy nature of it, suddenly there's a desire to change that and review that. I might be open to that. But this goal here was accepting that would be rather late in the process. User groups do need the facilities. But if there's some desire to do that, that can be done separate from item A and then proceeding with item B within and potentially C within the current funding envelopes. Some portion of that could be coming forward. And I think Mr. Backen, you and I, just to update council, had a brief conversation about the current funding envelope could potentially be put towards finishing some of those other areas in the northern portions along 84th and 82nd. So that's something that this staff report would contemplate. I believe staff would consider that right away. There's a current area already in progress just north of 82nd as part of phase 9, I think phase 8, phase 9. So I think if there's a desire, again, to go back to the beginning, if there's a desire to change the design, that to me would be a separate notice of motion that could come forward in the last couple of meetings here and embark upon a public consultations process. If people want to jump in on the Yorkson Community Park bandwagon, hey, I'm all for it. I'd like to see the best park possible built as soon as possible. So I think, however, Mr. Backen, just to confirm, there's actually currently 12 phases. I think this would drop it down, I believe, down to 9 or 10, depending on how quickly council would fund finishing it. So that's the goal here, is to get it finished, not have it finished in 2026, but have this finished much sooner, as soon as practical and achievable. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important, the funding and finding sources and getting the line entries, understand sources are important. That's one thing. Park and Rec Committee, again, getting information from them, running it by them, that's important as well. But the most important thing is making sure that we have the right park for the right, under the right circumstances. And again, sooner than later. Now, there was a comment about, perhaps we could have moved faster, but I always like to use an example. The tennis facility, for example, they built the facility, had to run on generators because hydro, even though hydro is in the area, didn't put the right connections in place, so they had to wait. So sometimes you have to wait for other utilities as well. So, let's move on with, I don't have any problem with the motion, and we'll get a report from staff, and we can plan and move accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll call the question on 01. Carries unanimously. And Councillor Arneson, I'll put you on.
Thank you, Worship. I think that this is self-evident. Just by way of background, I think
Can you
many...
move it first and then we'll...
Oh, sorry.
You can speak to it.
I forgot. I'll move the motion, please.
Moved by Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Kunst. Okay, Councillor Arneson, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for being preemptive.
okay.
Yeah. So I think many of us would have seen the newspaper article that was very distressing that talked about the fact that due to some changes to the interest rate through Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the federal entity, that the affordable housing project that I believe we unanimously endorsed, I can't quite recall, but anyways, 400 units of affordable housing at 208 and 83 Avenue is now no longer economically viable because with the interest rate increase, which obviously the government did, as we know, to check inflation, it's not been decoupled from the interest that is being charged on these longer-term loans. And so the intent of this motion is just to do some advocacy, as it says, to write to the provincial and federal ministers responsible and work collaboratively with them and find some ways to address the current funding gap.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward?
I just wanted to clarify, I mean, Mr. Mayor, would it be directing staff or directing council? Like, who's going to send said letter? It's not the staff, I wouldn't think, is it? Direct staff to write to the provincial. I'm just curious, who's going to send what, asking for what?
It's a good question. It could be staff will write it, and then it could be a signature, a request from council is signed by the mayor. So if that...
What do they do?
Yeah.
The mayor is kind of like the mayor's office will send a request saying, please sort this out?
With this motion saying, So I think with that change, and unless there's any opposition, I think with unanimous consent, we can take that amendment to say that council, or the mayor write on behalf of council. Is that correct? Yeah.
Just take out direct staff.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think if that's understood, I think that's fine. The current funding gap, though, I wasn't quite clear on what's causing it. I mean, I know I saw our MP taking issue with the federal government, which is nothing unusual. Mr. Backen, do we know if there's anything substantive behind those claims that we saw in the paper?
I can't really speak to the claims. I can only speak to some of the information provided to us by the applicant a month or so ago. And that was that the change of a few interest points caused a multi-million-dollar shortfall in the project. And the numbers were something like, I think for every half a point, it was something like $5 million or something. Now that's only an example because I'm not specific, but it shows the magnitude of the issue with a slight interest rate change.
Yeah, okay, so this sounds like an issue between the proponent and the CMHC, and if we're gonna weigh into it, Mr. Mayor, I'll just let you take care of it?
Yeah.
I guess, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And it's actually, I think, the way I understand it, and I could be wrong, CMHC is bound by the rules. It really should get to the minister. And so coming government, I think is a good thing. Councillor Long?
Yeah, so writing a letter is okay. I guess we're removing the words direct staff so that council writes a letter. But we also saw in the package today that there are meetings at the UBCM with provincial ministers, so maybe we should book a meeting with the housing minister to help, because we're going to attack this from all sides. I know it's a federal issue with the interest rate, but it may not be able, that change may not be able to be made, so maybe other agencies or governments have to chip in somehow. So can we arrange a meeting at UBCM with staff and the minister?
We could try. I think we may have passed the deadline, but we could certainly put a request in. And maybe, buttonhole them at the reception.
Friendly amendment, that's good.
Yeah. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask staff if in fact we have received confirmation from the proponent of the project that it's dead. Because all we've got is a newspaper article, and not everything you read in the newspaper is 100% correct.
Well, I think what we can relay is our conversations, because the proponent came to us and indicated that the project was no longer financially viable. So as such, they were looking at changing it to be half market housing and half rental housing, effectively using the market housing as a way to subsidize or cover the gap. Now, those were at the discussion stage. I don't know if an application yet has been made. Mr. Sefi, are you aware if there's been any amendment or application made?
Yes, my latest information leads me to say yes, we do have an application, and based on not just the proponent's request, but also on previous council direction, we are planning on processing it on an expeditious manner and bringing it forward to council hopefully in July.
So if I can add too, I know that what I heard the same thing. They're looking at ways to still make it work. So whether we lose 400 units of affordable housing or 200 units of affordable housing, I don't think we want to see any get lost. So if there's a way to salvage it at the end, but we'll get this letter out as quick as we can, and perhaps some. We don't know. I think they've tried pretty hard to change some minds.
Oh, okay, but I guess it seems to me that the proponent should be coming and asking us to do this. And I would like to refer this motion for an opportunity of the proponent to speak to us. Maybe they don't want to go ahead with this project. Maybe they want to go back into market housing. So I'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth before we jump to conclusions here.
Okay, I'm confident in writing this letter. It's just a letter, and it'll outline the issue. And it may not be for this one. It may be for other ones too, future ones. And so certainly if you want to, I can ask them if they want to come see us. But
yeah, well, I'd make that referral for
I'll second referral.
delegation from the proponent.
Let's deal with this one, and then if we want to make a request to ask the proponent.
I think it's premature for us to do this until we've heard from the proponent.
Okay, so I'll accept your motion to refer back to staff to ask the proponent to come forward. It's been moved by Councillor Richter, second by Councillor Ferguson. If it passes, that's great, but I think time is of the essence. I'd like to see this letter, so I'm going to not support that, but I hear what you're saying. Councillor Long, just on the referral?
Yeah, so let's try and solve this and make it all happy. Why don't we make this more generic motion that you write the letter on all kinds of housing opportunities down the road that are going to be impacted by this, so we can get that letter sent out, and we'll still have the proponent come and talk to us specific. So you'd have to remove, they're only in the warehouses anyway.
It's exactly. It's only in the warehouses. The motion itself, it gives us the latitude to be a little more generic.
I don't know if you want to wordsmith it now or not, but let's make it more generic, and we should get that letter off ASAP. So we can do both.
Yeah, we can, because the motion is specific and the whereases are there, it can be made a bit more generic with the example of that one. And so.
Mr. Backen looks.
Is that right, Mr. Backen?
We're just waiting for you to deal with the motion that you've accepted.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the referral. And that's.
Wait a second, does that mean we're not going to write the letter? I thought that's what
No, we have to deal with this, we have to deal with the referral first, okay?
Oh, then we'll write a letter after.
So I'll call the question on the referral, and then.
I don't think we need a referral because they already told us.
Yeah, can do. Just that, if the referral goes, then this is off the table until they come and speak to us, that's all. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to support both.
Yeah, well, you can't. We have to look at the referral first. Okay, can you, your vote is coming through?
Your Worship, I think there might be some confusion as to what council is voting on, because I think you're correct. Yeah. This is not an and, it's an either or. Yeah. So if it is referred, the matter's over, no letter. If you want the letter, then that would be processing this motion to its conclusion.
All right, the motion fails. Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long, Councillor Arneson opposed. Back to the main motion. I'll call Councillor Long on the main motion and just call the question.
Yeah, so we will make it more generic, right?
We can make it generic with that. Because it's a whereas, that can be the example.
Okay.
That's brought it to attention.
Yeah, then let's send the letter.
Okay, thanks. All right, call the question 02. Carries. Councillor Richter opposed. All right, is there any other business? Yes.
First.
Councillor Arneson. Oh yeah, you were quick on the draw that time.
Very quick. I had my hand hovering. Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to let Council know that I am bringing a notice of motion for the next meeting on second stage housing for women and children fleeing violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yes, and I want, I've got a number of items here, Mr. Mayor. The first is, as I referred to at the beginning of the meeting, Jim Clark, who is a long-time well driller here in the Township of Langley and sat as a member of the Water Resources Management Strategy Advisory Group, called me on the weekend to raise awareness of dropping aquifer levels. And as he's got a very long reputation in this community, for him to pick up the phone and do that raised some concerns in my mind. So I would like to request that we ask staff to invite Mr. Clark to address one of our next 2 council meetings. We only have 2 left, maybe do a 5-minute delegation so he can at least get this issue of the aquifer levels on the radar for the next council to deal with. I don't think we're going to have time to deal with it with this council. Yeah.
No. So, yeah, you can make the motion, basically be asking him to come.
Yeah,
a 5-minute
okay. So
presentation.
can I make that as a motion right now?
You can make it as a motion.
Okay, I'll make that as a motion
There's
right
a
now.
seconder. Okay, Councilor Arneson seconds it. Okay, I think I can just call the question. I've got a speaker's list. I'll call the question on this one. Call this, what do I call this, 03? 3, yeah. Okay. Carries unanimously.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back
And,
to,
yeah, and I'm going to do a notice of motion for the next meeting with regards to a 3% budget target for the 2023 budget. Staff are, I mean, we've only got 2 meetings left, but staff need to be working towards a budget for the next council to address right after they're elected. So I'd like them to be working within that 3% framework. So I'll bring that notice of motion forward. I also am going to bring forward a notice of motion requesting a legal opinion on the P1 zoning, providing for a rodeo under assembly uses. And specifically, my question will revolve around, does assembly use on any property allow a rodeo, and particularly in P1 zoning? So I'll bring those forward as well. And I'll yield the floor right now, and but I do want to come back to items distributed. I'll let other people have a chance to speak, and then I'll go to that.
thanks. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask how we left item 4 on today's distribution. We discussed it earlier in regards to the delegation. That is the email from Mr. Tim Bailey. How did
Okay.
we leave that? If not, I'd like to,
That was left, that was left as a request. There was a
Yeah.
motion on the floor
yeah.
to request and it was defeated.
So I'd like to consider so we didn't actually deal with the item itself, the email that was submitted. I'm wondering if it's possible.
We did, we received it. And
We
then-
received it, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay,
yeah.
so beyond receiving it, I'd like to see if there's a possibility of making a motion here to defer the RFP subject to a report to council to respond in writing to his email.
So, Your Worship, there is was going to be a memo coming to council at the next meeting, and I can confirm that the procurement, the RFP process would be not completed. The actual submission period would not be completed until the end of the first week of July, meaning that any award would be coming after that, which would be probably after council's last meeting. So there is time to process that issue.
Okay, so if there's some response coming, no motion is necessary, but just under the understanding that council would have at least one meeting opportunity to discuss that response prior to completion of that process.
Prior to the award, that's
Yeah,
correct.
okay, thank you.
Councilor Richter, do you have your written submission you can give to staff? We can all leave early? No.
No,
Ferguson jumped in.
Yeah,
He
okay.
jumped in.
had my,
He jumped in. He jumped in under the wire. I know you did, but it loses it when I go to motions,
okay.
so I'd forgotten. Go ahead, Ferguson. Councilor.
Okay, okay, again, I had a quick question for staff. Being too successful, what are the questions asked for me at the Canadian Championship at McLeod? Was somebody from I guess facility organizers from the national team organization said that they kept getting people coming up to them saying that there wasn't an awful lot of bike parking. More and more people are being, I guess, environmentally, sensitive, and they're riding their bike to events now. Have you thought, has the organization thought about working with Hub or something for bike parking And maybe not just, and I don't expect you guys here, this is something that's gonna take time, but bike parking for not just McLeod, but perhaps looking at others. So that's just something for you folks to consider, because it was so successful that bikes were having a hard time finding parking. Okay. Oh, my next question is, this is the elephant in the room, if I may. Any word from staff on the status of the Brookswood Fernridge neighborhood plans, if I may, through
Mr.
to
Backen?
staff?
Thank you, Your Worship. Where we had left it was from the delegations. We were, well, two things. We were updating the public input that we'd received previously. That was coming to some conclusion. And as well, we were updating our information to include answering the questions of the previous delegations from the last meeting. I think that's nearing completion, and I think there may be an opportunity for us to provide you with some updated information before the break. That's our goal, but it's still a work in progress.
Okay, and just a supplemental question to that. Again, the elephant in the room is the fact that, is there any chance that the review of the draft plan, it can be either distributed to council through changes that we've already made, so we can even have a reviewed draft? In other words, draft 2 or draft 3, you know how they do it in a university system, if I may, through the chair.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'd have the time to actually update the drafts entirely. I think we were looking more towards an information report back and probably seeking direction to update at that point, but that's still a bit of a work in progress, because frankly, I haven't seen the degree of the changes that have been suggested by the public or seen the answers to the questions from to the delegates.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, going to items distributed from June 23rd, there was item number 7 on page 13 regarding a request from the PAC to build a temporary field with a fenced enclosure prior to the start of the new school year. And I wanted to refer this to staff to see if this is something that could be done and what the cost would be, so that the kids will still have a field in September,
Okay.
or will have a field in
Mr.
September.
Backen, do you need a motion, or is that direction? Okay, thank you.
Item number 15 on page 42 concerns land use contracts. And I note that Township has to notify all the existing land use contracts that they're going to be terminated by June 30th, 2024. Now, there was reference in that report that a non-conforming use that is not active or is discontinued for 6 continuous months will lose non-conforming use protection. I'm wondering, do we have any kind of an inventory on how many? Because the report cites that there are 54 active LUCs and 1,798 properties subject to the LUCs.
Your Worship, I can respond, and then Mr. Richardson can add more information. We do have an inventory. We do know the number of land use or properties subject to land use contract, and we can break them down based on I guess the status in terms of their activity levels and whether they are going to automatically fall away or not. Mr. Richardson, anything to add?
I would just confirm and concur with your comments, Mr. Safety, but also the land use contracts that are active are noted in the memo, as you mentioned, Councilor Richter, through the mayor. Land use contracts on their base, sort of from the 70s, act as sort of a comprehensive development zone, for lack of a better word, but uses that might be more accustomed to council currently. So when they're reverting back to the standard zones the township has, there may be some, as are noted in the memo, that may be outside of that. But because they're all custom, as noted, there could be those potential uses that were referred to on an individual site basis that not necessarily be contemplated or captured in the zoning bylaw. So then the opportunities noted in the memo for those land landowners in this period of time to come to staff, dialogue with staff as to what their options might be to make those conforming if there is that potential gap.
Okay, so maybe I should phrase my question differently. Are we gonna have 54 of these to deal with, or are we gonna have 1,798 of them to deal with?
54.
Four?
54 land use contracts.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do we have that inventory that shows of the 54, if any have been discontinued or lapsed?
Through your worship to Council Richter, the 54 are the ones that the council has to date not disposed of. So, over time through, I guess my time here in the past 10 years, council at their discretion has discharged some of those land use contracts. So there would have been many in addition to the 54 that I can think of since my time here, maybe a dozen or so that we've disposed of.
Okay.
And council has the discretion to continue to do that. The memo is following legislation to advise folks of the opportunity to align with that, to make sure that they don't run into the condition that you've described.
Okay, that's good. Number 16 on page 44, with regards to the homeless shelter on Glover Road. I see staff did respond to the lady who sent in the concern, but I'm wondering, do we need to take it a step further and have a meeting with the ministry or the operator? Because I've heard myself many concerns about people wandering out on Glover Road and
Mr. Backen.
Your worship, we certainly could, but I'd phrase it this way. We have a good working relationship with some of the operators, and when I say that, I mean they will listen to us and take our position under advisement, which is probably the most we could hope. Some of the challenges we're facing are going to be ongoing because of the nature of their clientele, and that's going to be the challenge. So we certainly could have another meeting if we so choose. I think they're aware of the concerns and issues, but in some cases, and I'm thinking of some of the other locations, I would say they acknowledge and respect our concerns, but they're listening to the provincial mandate, and they understand there's going to be a certain friction that's evident with that.
okay. So we're aware of it, and the ministry and the operator are aware of issues as well.
Correct.
Okay. Items number 22 on page 62 and 23 on page 63 regard waiting periods for building permits. One cites a 7 to 9 month waiting period for an agricultural building, and the other one cites an extended waiting period for a unit to house a disabled family member. Is there anything that we can do to improve this, or is it just shortage of staff? We can't get the bodies in to help.
Mr. Seffi?
I wish I had a better answer, Your Worship, but I don't. We have done everything that we can in terms of processes, procedures, based on the resources that we have and based on the volume of work that we have to deal with. So, short answer to Councillor Richter's question is, we need more staff.
Mr. Seffi, before we leave the topic, though, we are looking at something different, and I think you probably should just reiterate the thought of the qualified professionals, maybe perhaps explain that for some of the more simpler applications. It will take some time from a policy perspective, but it is a potential solution.
I don't know if I would categorize it as a potential solution, but yet another tool in our box, Mr. Backen, thank you. And that is to follow up on actually a recommendation from a member of council, which was to look at what the city of Surrey is doing in terms of relying more on qualified professionals to actually issue, not just present the municipality with the necessary information, documentation, plans, etc., but rather based on provincial legislation, be able to issue permits. That requires a bit of a process itself, so it's not imminent. It cannot be done quickly because it requires several administrative, steps, but something that we can certainly bring forward to council. We are working on it and bring to council in the new year, hopefully, to try and address this issue on an ongoing basis. As I said, part of the procedural review that we have done and we will continue to do.
Okay. Well, at minimum, I think it needs to be flagged in the priority setting session for the next council. Item number 24 on page 64 regarding demolishing the old laundromat at the Bedford House. Is that something we can do?
Your worship, that's the small building to the, I guess it would be to the south of the Bedford House itself. I think we've established it is no longer considered heritage because of its condition. It had a lengthy history, but because of its nature, I think the only thing we can do is look at its demolition. Facilities, I'm aware, is considering that. It is not prohibitively expensive, but certainly is expensive given the size of the structure because there may be some, I guess, contamination issues through either lead paint or things of that nature.
Okay. So staff will be responding to the resident then? Excellent. And items distributed today. Item number 3 on page 4 concerns a problematic developer engineer. And I'm just wondering, do we have a list of problematic contractors? Are we allowed to have a list of problematic contractors?
Not really. The challenge is if we had such a list, it could be determined that it's defamatory in nature and they could actually take the position that it's incorrect in fact. What instead we rely on is the various regulatory bodies sometimes issue, I guess, disciplinary notices or letters, and we do reference those on occasion. But again, that's usually much more serious than we would see than what's being suggested. There's a difference between a poorly responding consultant as opposed to one that's faced disciplinary action. So the challenge is trying to put them on the right path, I guess, given their classification or their location in terms of the hierarchy of the regulatory bodies.
Okay. And will staff be responding to that, to the letter writer on that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Item number 5 on page 7. I'd like to refer that to staff for a report. There seems to be an increasing abuse of our burning bylaw, at least in the last week, and there's been a lot of wood smoke in the area that I live in, and I don't know why people are having wood fires when they can have propane fires instead. So I was wondering if staff could comment on this letter.
Thank you.
And the final thing is number 6 on page 12. The letter from the resident on 29th Avenue requesting resident-only parking. I'm wondering, is it possible for us to do this as a temporary measure until the parkade gets built on Fraser Highway? I believe it's the Janda Group that's building that parkade. I'm sure once the parkade is built, the parking issues will resolve, but can we do temporary resident-only parking?
Mr. Mackin, I can take a look at it and report
Take
back.
a look, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have.
Any other business? Is there a motion to terminate? Terminate! Councillor Davis moves it. There's a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Kuntz seconds it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
More meetings.